Alrighty. Oh, let's take it out of studio mode. We'll make it a little bit easier for me. Good evening, everyone. Blizzrad, I hate you. Welcome to
over here.
Yeah. Welcome to episode 44 of the Pathfinders podcast. Let's see. Let me turn this up a little bit. Mic check. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Okay, cool. Good evening. Welcome to episode 44 of the Pathfinders podcast. We are the Pathfinders. I am Tree0311 here with my partner in crime.
Hello, everyone. I'm a very exhausted
Nazeris, and we are the Pathfinders, and we are charting the way through all the nebulous information surrounding Star Citizen and its development. And we're going to be doing a whole bunch of charting this evening, as in like charting the way through the development to provide some context to a little bit of drama that's been going about the Star Citizen community, and a lot of it's well deserved. Because 318 is in a rough state. We knew it was going to be, but it is in a rough state. And the frustrations. Oh, Naz is quiet. The frustrations with
Naz is quiet. I'm sorry.
You're 100% on my end.
How's this? I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep my mic away from my headphones because apparently they bleed a lot.
It's because you have so much hair.
Sorry.
You got to shave your head, and then you don't have any bleed. You get a nice seal over the ears. I apologize. It's a Sunday, and that means that the bandwidth in my hotel is just not doing great. And so there's probably going to be a little bit of delay, lag with this stream. It is what it is. If you're watching this later on YouTube, hopefully it doesn't interrupt any of that, but it's usually pretty good about not doing it. Everyone's frustrations with 318, and .1, .2 are completely valid because it is borked right now. And we knew that 318 and PS is going to be the straight up struggle bus. Because PS is brand new technology. It's been in development for a little while now, but it is new technology. It is unproven outside of the in development environment within CIG, and it does work. What the problem is when it comes under significant strain and concurrency. With particularly with big events and a lot of players, that is when it causes a lot of issues, and they can't simulate that on within CIG. They can't simulate that within the PTU, and so that's where a lot of the frustration is coming from. People, how come they didn't test for this in the PTU? You can't do it. You can't. They have always said, they do the best they can to simulate as much as what we the players do. So that way when things get out to us, it's not in this state, but they can only simulate so much. Using their dev tools to simulate traffic going back and forth does not allow for, all the things that players do, especially with these large events. They cannot simulate that. That's why the live environment is there, because we are testing it in a live environment. But it's still in alpha. It doesn't mean that the alpha is in PTU and it's not an alpha in live. No, it's still an alpha, and we are still testing it. We're testing it at scale. We are the last line of testing before things, in order to get the feedback at scale that CIG needs. And it's
traditionally MMOs would do it one of two ways: build a much simpler game that doesn't have to be so cutting edge, so you're not worried about performance, or two, you have to hire a QA firm which does this scale under NDA.
Yeah,
that's a lot of
money. And even the QA firm,
obviously they're not doing the first one,
will do they'll have a bunch of people testing it, but it isn't anything like what CIG gets from us in testing. A firm will have, maybe hundreds of people testing, and then they'll also use different bots and stuff like that in order to put load on the systems that they use. But that's why online games are so hard, is because it is really difficult to test things at scale before their release. Oh my gosh, yeah, do a Blizzard. Yeah, the Blizzard, the Diablo 4 beta was atrocious.
Wait, what do you mean do a Blizzard and launch a broke nightmarish GTA? Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Jedi Survivor. Anthem. Destiny every day.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of the thing now. Like, you launch a game because it worked in testing, and then everyone touches it, and you have a million bugs that you never saw in testing. It's kind of like the thing now, because instead of spending 6 more months in QA or several $1,000s on a firm to do your QA, which goes to people anyway, because the firm hires lots of little people. Like there's plenty of sites, be a QA tester. Basically, they hand you a key and say break it, and you do.
Yep. I've been doing it for years.
Instead of paying them thousands of dollars, they just put out this buggy game, and then it's a comeback story. And No Man's Skies. Like, it's not like it's not unknown.
Yeah, and CIG needs,
some companies are starting to plan for this.
Yeah, and CIG needs, because PES is such a massive system and does so much more than what most games would ever do for persistence, they have to be able to test it at scale before this game goes to, a more release state. They have to have this information while it is in development in order to build it, so that way it is able to handle this level of scale. And this is part of game development, folks.
No other game has real trash.
Yeah, it's always been this way. It's just no one has done things this complicated because of, it's this much work and this much effort and requires this much investment in time and resources. So, but the other thing that we wanted to talk about, and that's our Spectrum Pulse this evening, is because everybody's, again, very valid frustrations with 318. Paul has said it very recently. A reason a lot of people are very frustrated is because the game has been in a pretty dang good state for a long time, with a lack of wipes, the ability to have progression, even though there's, always been bugs and there always will be bugs. This is the worst patch that we've ever had, the worst patch launch, because we have this new tech. But it's what that has done, because, prior to that, there was controversy in the last year and some change about I don't want to say reallocation of resources, but reprioritization of development resources towards Squadron 42 to get the Squadron out the door. And so there has been a significant number of people in the community that have the misconception that because CIG is working hard on Squadron, that it's taking away resources from Star Citizen's development, and that's why 318 is in the state that it is. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I have seen multiple content creators. The one that I can, I can remember saying it, and I don't think it originated with him. I think it originated elsewhere. But Morphologist posted this on Twitter, saying that 90% of CIG is working on Squadron 42. And that is so laughably incorrect. And I don't like to call people out, but if you're going to say something, on a public forum and make a claim like that, you better be willing to back it up and, have it actually be quantifiable. And
which
we were joking
because we literally have tools.
We have tools.
We have that data very vividly at our hands.
And
heck, if not through Shiny, then just go count the deliverables.
Yeah. And, the deliverable, I mean, you'd have to go through and count every little person working on every current deliverable. Thank God for Shiny.
Well, it would take a while, but we have
You could do it. Yeah, you could do it. And, but that's, again, this is just like the when morphologists said it would take decades to get through the ship pipeline. This is really, this is very bad table napkin math that is factually incorrect. And I was laughing about it with Jake Acapella, Jake Bradley, Roadmap Jake, because I said, and he's like, he literally laughed at that statement. He's like, that is so incredibly incorrect. And I was like, well, yeah, I know. Don't preaching the choir here. And so Naz and I covered this in the fall last year because people were up in arms about it back then. And we, it was a earlier podcast. And so we're going to rehash some of those things for the community just so we can get this information out there and clear up these misconceptions, because there is a lot of people at CIG working on Squadron 42, but it isn't 90%. And the big misconception is that the teams that were reprioritized for Squadron 42 are only working on Squadron 42. And that's one of the major themes of CitizenCon this last year, is that they're not only working on Squadron 42, they're working on things that are shared. And so we're gonna get into that. We're gonna help clear up those misconceptions, show you what these teams are working on, show you how it's actually broken down, and how talk about how Squadron's development impacts the PU, in more than one way, and what it means going forward. And then we'll get into my scanner anomaly. So first, we need to switch over to our other screen. And I have a bunch of things queued up on Google Chrome, and we'll go through them and explain what we're looking at, and talk about what you're seeing in order to provide context to this conversation. Before we do that, though, I just want to remind everyone, if this is your first time, or hanging out on the stream or watching the YouTube video later, down at the bottom below the chat, you'll see that I've got a goal for Stack Up and a subs goal for Stack Up. Everything I do is for charity. Everything, all monetization goes to stackup.org, alongside direct donations by the community. I recently did the math between the direct donations and my own donations for this year, where actually the goal thing on the bottom left is wrong, just because it lags behind from when Twitch actually pays out the donation money to the charities. But we have actually raised like $850 something this year for stackup.org. So we are well on our way to our goal of $1,000, which will sponsor a supply crate for a lucky veteran or service member who's on active duty, to connect them with video games and video game communities to help combat PTSD and the stress of being away from home, away from support groups. I'm going to adjust my camera a little bit. There we go. So yeah, please consider being a part of what we do here, and join me in supporting stackup.org. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you guys hanging out and being a part of this, because every little bit helps. So let's get over into the other screen. And I apologize if you hear background noise in my hotel, which, again, I'm living in a hotel. It's got 2 weeks. I get to go home in 2 weeks after tomorrow.
Just in time for Invictus.
Well, I get to go home for 4 days. And then I get to go leave for another month to go to another course. So, yeah, it is what it is.
That's horrible.
But yeah, you can hear the air conditioning in my hotel room running behind me. But at least I will be there for like a day or two of Invictus, so I will be able to log on and just check things out for at least a day. But then I won't be back until like third week of June or whatever. But yeah. So Nazeris is going to kick us off with this Spectrum Pulse, and we're just going to take turns going through the information we've got for you guys.
All right, so starting off, we have where it all began. Basically, this allocation that Tree alluded to of resources, and how they started moving little by little to a more squadron-focused as far as like company momentum. So back in 2021, the roadmap rounded up for September 8th. said about the changes. To summarize the core gameplay team. Oh, I'm on the wrong tab. Hold on a second. It's that tab. Yeah, that's right tab. Okay, never mind. All right. Okay. Last week on Star Citizen Live, Richard Tyler outlined a few changes that are coming to the core gameplay pillars release cadence. If you haven't, there's a link, and we'll actually later on in the show notes. Anyway, to summarize, the core gameplay teams, actor feature, actor tech, weapon feature, and weapon content are shifting their focus to deliver their features for Squadron 42 first, before they then release into the persistent universe. This has a twofold benefit. Squadron 42 will benefit greatly from the additional resources, and the persistent universe will see features in a more complete state. This does, however, make an impact on the release view of the roadmap. While some features may shift, it's important to remember that you can track progress of any given feature on the progress tracker. So this was also kind of a foreshadowing of the change from release view being the default to progress tracker being the default when you open the page, because the release view gives you almost no data, and it is the worst thing to try and pull speculation from, because there's almost nothing there, and they're continuing to make sure that stays speculation free, almost like as little content as possible on the release view. But the progress tracker and a progress tracker view on the roadmap is literally everything they're doing on a most of the time every 2-week basis, because that's when they update every 2 weeks. So it says, in addition, with this polish, we're adding the columns for Q2 22. So the two things to take away from this is that actor feature, actor tech, weapon feature, and weapon content, so all moved over to a Squadron first, and that's going to be kind of a theme throughout this thing. It's Squadron first. However, it doesn't mean anti-Star Citizen. It means that the feature will be finished for Squadron, and then put into the persistent universe, which we've already had a couple things come over. And like, so one of the things that happened right before all of this was the carts, the murder carts in the hangars. There's still no gameplay for them, and the entire company is like, wait a minute, maybe we actually wait to publish stuff until there's like actual gameplay for it. And this is kind of not including the ship problem that lots of people like to go back and forth. There's just strictly like features of the game. So that happened right before this whole thing happened. So stuff is going to be finished in Squadron, and then the entire pipeline, almost, not the pipeline is not the exact correct word, but the entire pipeline, basically what it is, where it's used, and how it's used, is all going to be ported straight into the PU. So hacking was supposed to come in way sooner than it's going to, like a year or two ago. And they said, no, we're going to develop this for Squadron first, which means they're going to get devices, they're going to have multiple ways of doing so, and they're going to have things to use it on, instead of just, you can go up to somebody's ship and punch it with a hacking chip kind of thing. Like, that's what it could have come out if they hadn't said Squadron first. Because Squadron is a released game, and so they're trying to finish a feature, then port it over. That was much longer summarization than I meant to do. Anyway, moving on to
next tab, right?
I don't know how you have these lined up. Yes, the Richard Tyler video. Did you want to play any of that specifically?
Oh no, I just put the link in for the show notes later. Yeah, sorry.
Got it. Okay, that's the link thing. Okay, so that is in the show notes for those who read show notes.
Yeah, just a reminder for everybody, especially if you're watching this on YouTube later, all of the links for everything that we're going to show you are in the show notes. So the show notes will be linked in the description below, down there, and you can click on it. It's just a Google Doc that I copy from our OneNote, and everything is in there that you can see here. So if you want to see it for yourself, you want to refer back to it, make some bookmarks, whatever, use it in conversation, by all means. It's a resource here for you, so that way you know that we're not just making stuff up.
We need our own compendium of topics spreadsheet.
Yeah, No joke.
All right. Yeah, so about a year later, nope, not a year. Nope, half a year later, 6 months later about, on April 27th, 2022 is this post. And this is kind of a very evolution of what we just talked about. So this is taken from the vehicle feature and experience teams, and also UI feature teams. There are paragraphs in there. It says vehicle feature team, or I can't read. Vehicle feature and vehicle experience. With this published, the vehicle experience team is merging with the vehicle feature team, including all of their deliverables. The reason for this, again, is twofold. First, this allows greater streamline of production for these two teams. Second, the vehicle feature team is now having its features direction driven by Squadron 42 requirements. Deliverables worked on by this newly merged team will now follow a similar cadence to the core gameplay pillar. That is, features will be made for Squadron first before being ported over to Persistent Universe. And stuff that we can actively see with this team right now is stuff like the control services. That is something that's being developed for Squadron first and then ported over. And I believe we're actually supposed to be getting it this year sometime.
I don't want to make any promises about dates. I just want to highlight that.
No, but they had said that in the last vehicle talk.
Yeah, they are working on all these things, and each one of these things is at various stages of development. But if you hang out with us for the monthly reports, and you see how excited we get when we go through the Squadron 42 report, based off of the way they're describing the work and how it's coming along and where things are, and we're going to talk about some of these individual items. The progress is really good, but as Naz said, at the beginning, because they are building them for Squadron in order to release in a complete state. They won't get ported over to Star Citizen until they are done and in a release state. So that's why these things are taking longer than they would normally, and it sucks to be patient, but at the same time, like, everybody's been complaining about this for years. Everybody's complaining about Star Citizen releasing features that are incomplete, and don't have any gameplay for years. And now all of a sudden, things are taking a little longer because they want to get them complete, and we're complaining still. Pick something. Pick a direction and stick with it, guys. Hey, Ionic Force, good evening. Thanks for joining us, buddy. Please continue, Naz.
Yes. And then also the UI feature team, similar to the above, the UI feature team has been renamed the Squadron 42 or SQ42 UI feature team. This now falls under the core gameplay pillar and will also follow a similar cadence as outlined for the vehicle feature team. So if anyone has wondered, clip this if you need to. If anyone wondered why there's no Star Citizen UI team, it's because the Squadron 42 SQ42 UI feature team is the UI feature team. So the maps they built that we saw, the building blocks, that improvements, the UI cards that we got shown at CitizenCon with the new holo display for managing ships, all of that is spearheaded by the Squadron 42 UI team, which benefits everything Star Citizen Squadron 4 CIG related.
There are some bespoke UI things. Like if you go through, that's one thing that I've noticed. If you go through and look at the individual chapter work, certain chapters will have work by the UI team because there are little bespoke UI things that are bespoke for certain locations and stuff that are part of the game. But the overwhelming majority of their work is for the big ticket UI features, the things that we've all been clamoring for years, which are very far in development. If you follow the monthly reports, that these things, that the MFDs, the HUD, all that stuff, is very, very far along. It's not all these things are not, if you go read the monthly reports, it's not so much that they're in production anymore. They're in testing. It's all testing and feedback, and iteration, but, it's not, they're still doing R&D and still, building this or that. It's like, no, the consistent theme is this is in testing, that's in testing, this is in the dev branch for Squadron 42. So, yeah.
Yep.
The other thing,
think also the
oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So the UI cards for the racing signs that we now have in 318, those were a byproduct of the UI feature team being able to work on this feature for Squadron. And also I'm pretty sure, I have no confirmation of this, I'm pretty sure also the yellow wisps UI things in the new Lorville that we see are also part of the new UI setups, because they're large holographic things. I think that's part of the thing. Anyway, so one of the benefits of doing the Squadron first is that they don't have to hurry up, get like terrible version of any product feature and release that the first quarter possible. They get to spend time on it, very much like the underground facilities. So you can see how developing Squadron 42 and with all these teams doing these things in a longer scale has kind of made them think, oh wait, what if we actually give our dev teams the time they need to develop a feature? So underground facilities and the Orson platform things weren't given, hey, you have 2 quarters to make this, you have to get it out. Because that gave us the original bunkers, the original underground facilities, which they stagnate because they were put out in haste without actually thinking of every gameplay. They were thought of as bunkers. And so they developed a bunker. The underground facilities, building interiors, and so on and so forth. Most things that are in development right now are being developed for everything, not just for a thing. And that takes time. And so they're actually giving the dev teams now the time to develop these things to build for everything.
And
that's right. Okay, so now you're going to go through all of the things.
Yeah, and so the teams that were reprioritized, there is technically 1, 2, 3. There's the actor feature team, actor tech, weapon feature, weapon content, vehicle feature. So 5, and then Squadron 42 UI feature. So there's 6 teams. And then I also included in this UI tech, even though they weren't reprioritized, they are still working on plenty of other things. But because the features, for the Squadron 42 UI feature team are built upon tech that the UI tech team builds. So, but it's all shared. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pull up each one of these teams on the progress tracker, and we'll quickly scroll through and look at the work that they're doing. And then I have a list of sort of big ticket features, things that people have been saying they're excited about, that we've been wanting to see, things that are big quality of life features and additions to gameplay that are in development right now by these teams. That can,
I don't know if you have the caveat in here, but we are in between 2 major updates to the roadmap. So
thank you.
Downstream into I think is it Q2 update for downstream that we're
this next Wednesday should get the last of the downstream teams added to Q2, and then it should also be hopefully all, or at least most of the upstream teams for Q4, because we already have Q3.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. You should also mention. I'll pull up the buddy, the roadmap buddy
companion guide,
which is a much better name than companion and roadmap buddy.
Roadmap buddy.
You guys know which of these teams are upstream and downstream. So downstream teams, we don't have the most up-to-dated, mostest information. So these might be farther along, or they might have more work on them, is the caveat. I just want to make sure that was said.
Yeah, and some of them, I think there's only one of them that, I think it's maybe it's UI Tech, I don't remember which one, doesn't have their schedule up yet. The rest of them do, but they also could have, in this next update on Wednesday, they could have more sprints added to what's on here right now for the downstream teams. This is just what's been added in there so far by Jake. So the first team is the actor feature team. And so you can see we're going to quickly scroll down so you can look, at which game is, what's being worked on, for which game. And you can see quite clearly that there's a good number of things that are shared, but there's also a number of things that they have worked on that are PU only. And so, but you can see all these things are shared assets. There's one thing, character work, that is Squadron 40. Oh, sorry, Mop and Bucket too. That is Squadron 42 only. One, it's like
so.
But then you can also see
Star Citizen has 2 more than Squadron on here.
Yeah, and this is the deliverables, but you can see
it's Squadron.
Yeah, and then the character work.
Sorry.
And the character work is, who knows how the actor feature team plays into that. But right now they have a bug fixing.
Mantle, mining gadgets, and persistent entity streaming are all Star Citizen only. On here, on their work. I'm not saying the features, I'm just saying their work on it.
Yeah.
So.
But right now, the actor feature team is working on actor status tier 2, which is new elements such as hygiene, NPC status tracking, multiple bytes, DNA integrity, medical insurance, cybernetic limbs, and cloning. There's been a ton of work done on this already. This is just their sprint on this. And they got a bug fixing and tech sprint. They've been doing a lot of miscellaneous and support. They've been wrapping up Mock and Bucket. But you can see that, they have been heavily involved in the new player interaction experience, which is this is a really good example of getting a complete feature with the development of Squadron 42 instead of things coming in piecemeal, because they are doing the whole new player interaction experience, Tier 0 through Tier 2, in one fell swoop, as part of the development on Squadron 42. And so when they are done with the all of this feature for Squadron 42, then it can be ported over to Star Citizen, and we'll have an entirely new baseline for interaction. So you've got your hints and interactions, you've got lockers and inventory, your visor HUD and helmet. It's a whole bunch of new stuff. Prone Tier 1, seated item handling.
The Constellation. The Constellation. I don't know. It wasn't the Constellation commercial, but it was it the Pyro demo? Might have been the Pyro demo. It might have been earlier. Showed the locker system in the Constellation. Mm-hmm. We still don't have it yet.
Yep. Yeah, because they've been trying to figure out how they want to get about putting it in there. And I mean,
yeah, we're gonna have grabby hands. We're like, that's an idea. That's a terrible idea. Why did we do that?
Yeah, and then going back to the drawing board and saying, let's do it this way instead. Swimming Tier 0. But this is the actor feature team. And you can see that they are not working on hardly anything that is Squadron only. And all these things are big things that will make a big difference in our experience in Star Citizen. But of course, they are taking longer to get over into Star Citizen because they're building them in a more complete state for Squadron first. But when they come over, it'll be like, oh, sweet, boom, we've got player interaction experience, Tier 0 through Tier 2, all the features within that, development set all at once. Actor Tech Team. So the Actor Tech Team, just like the UI Tech supports Squadron 42 UI feature, Actor Tech supports Actor feature, building the tech in order for them to build the feature.
And just so we know, the Actor feature, the one we just finished, is upstream, and the Actor Tech is downstream.
Yeah. So they'll be working on a feature, and they'll tell Actor Tech, "Hey, we need to be able to do this, and how can you make this happen?" And so Actor Tech Team, when you saw the EVA Tier 2 demo at CitizenCon, we're going to get more into that later. That was all worked by the Actor Tech Team, in order to get that feature in a much better state than what we have now, because it's going from Tier 0 to it's really Tier 0 to me. But it's taking a giant leap to Tier 2, because we're also going to be not only moving using our hands and zero G push pull, which is another feature, but also having limited EVA fuel, and we're also going to, and it's going to encourage us to use the 0G push-pull in our tractor beams more than our limited EVA fuel. But it also makes the whole movement process a whole lot more diegetic as well. But you can see that a lot of the things that these teams have been reprioritized for a long time. And you can see, if you go back, you see they had a lot more work to do in order to get these things done. But now, they're coming up on the time where, okay, they're wrapping up a lot of these features, especially given we saw a lot of these things demonstrated at CitizenCon last year, and they've continued to talk about their progress in the monthly reports, and the progress is really good. Work on Prone Tier 1, again, seated weapon handling Tier 2, 0G push and pull, which is part of EVA Tier 2. One second. I clicked the wrong one. Yeah, actor feature. Did I have two of them up?
Possibly.
Oh, whoops.
So
I think I clicked on the
while you're
wrong
getting
one.
that fixed up, I just noticed how stair locomotion has been done for a while, and I'm trying desperately to find a clip of NPCs using stairs.
Actor tech, actor feature.
Give me NPCs. Where's the stupid
Weapon
search?
feature, weapon content.
Here. Where's it?
Why
I'm
aren't
looking
you
for
loading?
the. Don't know. Anytime. No. Past year.
Oh, of course, my internet is just absolutely
What's it called?
struggling this evening.
Anything I can do?
No, it's not you. It's just the internet. It does this every now and then. It'll just like take a huge pause.
So I'm watching the NPCs use stairs. I don't know if it's like that much better.
No, I don't want.
Except for the more.
It's a different link. How is it? Oh, maybe I did click the wrong one.
Which one are you looking at?
Oh, yep, my links are wrong. Whoops. So hold on. Weapon.
Feature, active feature.
Yeah.
Please stand by. We're experiencing some technical difficulty. Oh yeah, you do have.
Yep.
Featuring content, weapon.
I copy pasted wrong.
Gasp.
Apologies. All right, so we have weapon feature. Now I need weapon. Whoop. Weapon content. Weapon content doesn't have their schedule up. That's what it is. Bums. Let's see. Deliverable view.
At least one of them.
And
and so the
was-
score for actor tech, we have only one being Squadron only, and two being Star Citizen only. So Star Citizen again wins on this team. Three are only Star Citizen. So it's a 3-1 win over, 3-1 win over Squadron for the actor tech team. Are we moving on to the actor feature team?
No, we're on weapon feature
Weapon
and then
feature.
weapon content. Yeah. And so I want weapon content. There we go. Cool. All right. And let's reposition that.
Did you do it that badly? Hold on.
I just copy and pasted the actor feature one into weapon content and weapon feature. So weapon feature, here we are. Here's all their work. Here's one that they've been working on for a long time, cutting tier 2. Well, cutting tier 2 is a feature I'm very excited about because I talk about it extensively in my upcoming boarding actions video. But cutting is what's going to allow you to do freeform cutting on different surfaces. It's going to allow you to cut open locked containers. It's going to allow you to you can use cutting for breaching for boarding missions. So it's a pretty important feature, in my opinion, that'll be used in a lot of different ways. But they've been working on it for a long time, and so I'm looking forward to seeing it. But that's obviously something. Yeah, it's going to be in Squadron 42, but it plays a big role in Star Citizen, and it's just cutting. So once they're done with the feature, they can move it on over, fairly easily. But you can see that the weapon feature team also has a number of things that they are working on right now, just now starting, that are PU only. The different ammunition types, flak, disarray, and incendiary, right? And plasmas in Squad 42, apparently.
Interesting.
But they're working on weapon misfire and wear right now, which is where your weapons will jam and overheat and all that. And they just talked about that in the monthly reports that they're working on it. So again, there's the idea that all these teams are working on Squadron 42 only. No, they're working on these features that are very much a part of Star Citizen, and they just have to get them complete. And once they're completed, they're tested in Squadron 42. Then they get ported over by the PU team, the weapon content team. Again,
weapon feature, by the way, is upstream, and again,
weapon features upstream.
Is down.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you can see that the weapon content team has had a lot of work to do, and they probably have the most squadron specific things, but it's still like 3 or 4. But you can see that there's a lot of shared
deliverables.
Yeah, they have a lot of deliverables, a lot of things they've been working on, and a lot of things that we have seen work on for quite some time. The fire extinguisher. I don't know when they. Is that on there?
Yeah, it's near the bottom. Uniflex crossbow.
Oh, yeah, way down there. The Volt weapons, we've seen work on those fairly recently. They worked on salvage. They just a little sprint on space mines. They even created a military-specific variant of the multi-tool. But they're the ones that are working on a lot, like the two-handed Grey Cat industrial salvage tool. Okay, once that feature is done, they move that over to the PU. And we get to use it soon. And I imagine they're going to start working on the industrial cutter and the tractor tool as well as part of cutting tier 2 and the work on tractor beams. Because they've already done work on those. But again, not bespoke squadron work. Sure.
It's 12 to 4.
As far as bespoke items.
Yep.
Yeah. The vehicle feature team. So interestingly enough about this one, it says that aerodynamic control surfaces is Star Citizen only. So some of these things, could, I don't know how true that is, but could be bugged. And they have a lot of chapter work on the different vehicles. But there's a lot of the things that they have been working on that are Star Citizen only, and they've continued to work on Star Citizen only the entire time while they've had their direction reprioritized towards Squadron 42. But they've been working, they did a ton of work on master modes. We saw, there's this big old sprint on master modes. Like I had a bunch of people recently say, "Oh, we're not going to see master modes in forever." And it's like, okay, I mean, they said that master modes were in the dev branch and they were testing them. In the process of testing it in their early monthly reports this year.
Yeah, I think when they showed it at ISC, they said the biggest thing holding it back right now is the UI.
Yeah.
Yep. Like, as far as a feature, it's functionally complete.
Yeah, they're waiting on the UI team to work on it. Actually, here, let's go ahead and open up the deliverable on it really quick. See if there's any recent work from other teams.
The score on this is going to be, I think, our first Star Citizen loss. A couple of chapters, so...
Yeah. So it seems like they're just waiting on UI to do their work after testing the feature, but they've been testing master modes internally in Squadron 42. I think that was like in the December through February monthly reports for Squadron 42. The MFD rework, huge project in order to rework the multifunction displays. This one is one where I think we will see this MFD rework, for the ships that they are testing it on, the Gladius, the Hornet, things like the Retaliator, maybe even the Gladiator. We'll see it on those things in the PU first as they're doing this rework once it gets ported over, and then they after what they need to do for the Squadron 42 ships is done, they'll continue to work on that for the other ships. But a lot of the base work will already be there. In that, they're using building blocks in order to build out the UI for the MFDs, and then creating the designs in these systems. But then they're also working on the workflow, so that way when they do it for other manufacturers and other ships, because it's mostly manufacturer specific, it's not really ship specific. They will be able to port this over to the PU relatively quickly and quickly expand upon it. They've been working on a bunch of ships that we have seen in the last 2 years. Working on the player interaction experience. The quantum travel experience is supposed to be getting a huge update. This is one of those ones where I think it's a bug, where it should say Squadron 42 as well, because I imagine, they talked about that in, I want to say it was the recent monthly reports for Squadron 42. So, but, that's, quantum travel is quantum travel, and making, updating the quantum travel mechanic to move players in a more physically realistic way and improving the general QT experience, adjusting how spooling, calibrating, interdictions, and entering, exiting work. So, this isn't something that is a massive lift to port over to the PU. It's just quantum travel, but, making it so that way it works and functions more appropriately, in line with master modes. Resource management. They're continuing to work on resource management. And we know that resource management has been a big push for them. And they are working really hard on it. They've been talking about it basically every monthly report, and they've been working on it for quite some time now. But, here's the design sprint for vehicle feature, and here's the engineering sprint, and you can see them still working on it via the Shiny Tracker. It's again, do we use that in Squadron 42? I don't know. Is that a thing? But, it says it's PU specific, and they're actively working on it. I think so, too. Yeah.
Like, the Gladius is going to have a capacitor for guns. Don't overheat guns. You get EMP. Yeah. Like, it's part of a ship. It's going to be part of every ship. The ships don't fundamentally change between the two games. Yeah. Unless it's for some cinematic purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, other than, having... like they change, certain ones have different hardpoint sizes and slightly different performance characteristics, but it's tweaking things on the behind the screen portion, not visually, or how we, like the difference between the F7A and an F7C, Squadron 42 vehicle support. This is a big one, but it says it's Squadron 42 only. But a lot of these ships are going to end up getting put into the PU eventually. This to me means that it's the although there's a different sprint for the that's enemy not in this one. There's an enemy ship sprint. There's a Vandal fleet sprint. So this one to me means that they're talking more about this is just an overall polishing and work on the different
this is kinda...
UE ships.
Yeah, this is probably the catch-all, much like not Misc, but miscellaneous feature or miscellaneous. I forget what the sprint's called. Miscellaneous support and bug fixing. This is probably catch-all specifically to obfuscate work on squadron vehicles. So tinfoil hat. When my Pegasus shows up, it's going to be inside there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like the
we're talking about Squadron. I will not bring up my Pegasus. Like, it's not going to happen.
Those leaked capital ships from that leak that came out last fall, probably under this,
awesome.
Plus, like all the work for gold standard work on this and that, instead of having to have a new deliverable for each one, they can just lump it up into here. So Squadron 42 UI. So this is a big deal because everybody, I don't think anyone likes the star map. I think there's a lot of gripes to do with the augmented reality and map and marker system, all that sort of stuff. And so the UI team is just absolutely going ham with building new UI, and these features are massive quality of life updates. And when I was going back and rewatching, I rewatched the entire partner development video from from CitizenCon this last year, and one of the big things when they're talking about all the UI is how the different UI things that are being built by this team for Squadron are built so that way they are systemic and they work throughout the game. They're building it with the fact that it's not just Squadron 42 in mind, but the PU in mind. And they talk about how when you have assets like locations that are highly detailed, it makes it really easy with the new tech for the AR map marker and the radar map and radar system rework. Those two reworks, they showed off heavily during the partner development video, and they talked about specifically how those things would be able to be ported over into the PU, and how they are being developed in a very systemic fashion, so that way the work to get it in the PU is minimal at best. And that's the part of the issue is so many people when that was played, because that was the biggest part of that sort of theme.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Part of the ship, part of the crew.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Captain, oh my gosh, that's ironic.
Very.
That's funny. I heard the soundbite. I didn't see the GIF play. Do I not have it up? Oh, did I not put it on this scene again? Oh gosh, I forgot to. I put them on I made new scenes, to use temporarily for when you are when you're not available, and I forgot. I put it in those ones, but I forgot to put it in this one. Captain Mike Sparrow, thank you so much for the follow. Really appreciate you. I heard the sound alert in my head, but normally I have a sound alert and a little GIF that plays when people follow or subscribe. But thank you so much for the follow. I really appreciate it. Good to see you this evening. Thanks for joining us. That is what we're all about here. Is we are thinking our way through all this information regarding Star Citizen Squadron 42. We're putting things in proper context because we want to have. Okay, so the sound alert worked, just not a GIF. Okay. That's good. I will have to play around with that though, because I thought that the sound alert needed both. But
and as far as the score for the vehicle feature team, we thought it was going to be an upset. 16 for Squadron or 16 for Star Citizen to the 11 for Squadron. However, the score for this one, the UI feature, the Squadron 42 UI feature team, shocker, it's our first upset. 16
when you have a bunch of
2 Star Citizen
chapter work things, that's what skews it.
Well, even last one had a whole bunch of chapter work, but Star Citizen still won.
Yeah,
like it's insane.
And we're
going to
get more into this when we show you guys the shiny tracker breakdown of how many people are working on what. because the shiny tracker breakdown will give you literally a every 2 weeks update. But the big features, for Squadron 42 UI, there are a lot of little bespoke UIs throughout the levels and chapters of the campaign, that are made in order to make the environment, look cool and work and function, and are part of the gameplay, and things that potentially we could see in the PU eventually, but they're not systemic things like the big ticket features that this team is working on. And those big ticket features are we build this, it is in the game code, we have tested it, it works for Squadron 42, here you go, it's in the PU, and congratulations, it basically works. It's they built it. The word they used multiple times was systemic. So that way it isn't just for Squadron 42 episode 1 or 2 or 3. It's these, all of Squadron and all of the PU without having to do much of any work afterwards. So AR, which is augmented reality, map and marker system. That's part of the radar rework and FPS scanning and ping, the stuff that you saw at the beginning. I think it was towards the beginning of the partner development video in CitizenCon, where they put out the ping and they showed all those things, all the characters moving around and the things you could interact with, as well as so it's augmented reality on your HUD, but also certain things will also show up on the map. That is also that is generated by that by that rework. Interestingly enough, the Grey Cat Industrial Salvage Tool UI is being worked on, which is why I think that we're going to see that not for 319, but as a 320 thing. When they mentioned that the Grey Cat Industrial Salvage Tool is the two-handed one, but there's also a backpack that essentially turns you into a Ghostbuster, but for salvage. So you can carry more. And I think after they get done with the Grey Cat Industrial Salvage Tool, they'll also get to work on finishing the Industrial Cutting Tool, which is the two-handed one, as part of Cutting Tier 2, and also the Tractor Beam, because they've built the assets. We've seen them in videos. They just haven't built out all they haven't finished building the functionality in the UI. Hacking Tier 0 has had a ton of work. And this is one of the only ones where we're getting hacking in a lower end state in Squadron than we are for what will eventually be in the PU, just because hacking isn't going to be a huge part of Squadron compared to what's in the PU. But they are doing a lot of work for it, and they've been talking about this in the monthly reports recently. The map and radar system rework. I'm actually going to show you guys a video at the end of this that I made. The MFD rework we talked about. The Mobiglass rework, in order to make the Mobiglass the entire thing, not just certain individual apps, but the whole thing will run on building blocks. And we saw that. Was that in the? Yeah, that was in the video as well, I think, where they showed you the new Mobiglass and stuff, and it will be far more performant and work correctly, make it a lot easier for them to add new apps to it as well later on. Squadron 42 UI plays a big part.
Ha, 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 ha.
Oh, I was wondering why you're being so quiet. For the hints and interactions.
I was not being quiet.
Yeah. You're like, why do you keep talking over me, Tree?
I was too. I'm like, I don't think he wants me talking today.
Yeah.
Like he does one show on his own. He's all of a sudden I'm just chopped livered.
The visor and lens rework, all this really important work, and the UI stuff is such a big deal for Star Citizen, especially right now, because there is UI in Star Citizen. A lot of the UI is very dated, very old, non-performant, and has a lot of bugs. And so this is a huge overhaul project, for a lot of the UI in for Squadron 42 first, and then put over in the PU. That's going to make our gameplay experience a whole lot better, when the game's not crashing. The last one, and this is just because the UI tech team builds tech for the UI feature team. Again, a lot of the same work going on, building the tech in order to build the feature. But a lot of stuff to be very excited about. And if you hang out with us when we read the monthly reports, you understand why, because they tell you straight up, the progress that they're making, and how far things are in development, and the fact that this is in testing, and we got good feedback, and we're gonna add a few things or change a few things, but it's the progress on all these features that are being worked on is really great. Before we move on to the Shiny Tracker portion, I have a list, and we talked about a lot of these features. And each one of these things I'm going to rattle off before Nazeris talks about the breakdown on the Shiny Tracker. Each one of these things is things that we just looked at under the team's view for not versus the deliverables view, or at least most of them. But these are all features that are very important, very exciting, and may have big impacts in the game that are being developed in a more complete state for Squadron 42 to port over into Star Citizen. And these are all things that have been mentioned in the monthly reports and are receiving ongoing work right now in a pretty decent state. And each one of these, the actual deliverable view, the link to it is going to be in the show notes. So if you want to just open the show notes and you can click on it and go to the progress tracker, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm not going to open up each one. So actor status tier 2, AR, augmented reality, and map marker system rework. Cutting tier 2, EVA tier 2, FPS devices tier 1, which is deployable devices like the bearing breaching charge. FPS radar and scanning. Mantle tier 2, map and radar system rework. Master modes, the MFD rework. Hacking tier 0. Of note, the core gameplay pillar hasn't had any new sprints on this in several quarters. It's all downstream work right now. So the upstream teams that were working on hacking are all done with their work. It's all downstream at this point. So I expect to see more information on hacking soon. They did just mention it in the recent monthly report. The Mobiglass rework. Player interaction experience tier 0 through tier 2. The visor and lens rework, so for your helmet. Zero G push and pull. A lot of really awesome features that we have, either had big mentions of in the monthly report and have been tracking when we read those, or they've shown them off to us directly in the CitizenCon videos or in sprint reports and stuff like that. But Naz, I'll give it back to you in order to talk about the actual breakdown of how many people are working on what, via the Shiny Tracker. And I need to pull that up.
Right, so getting into the nerdy data points that we got. And there's lots of numbers here, so...
Real quick, before you do that, in order to find this, you go to shinytracker.app. We go over this every 2 weeks with the roadmap roundups. And to see this breakdown, shinytracker.app, it leads you to this page. And then you go to the scheduled deliverables report for the roadmap roundup that you want to look at. And we're going to look at the scheduled deliverables report for April 19th, the one that was just recently. And then you click on that, and it opens up this page. You scroll down, and extra analysis is in every report. And that's what it's looking at.
All right. So, as Tree mentioned, one of the kind of basis of our talk today is that the claim that the majority, or like 90% of the company, is only working on Squadron away behind closed doors, and we don't get anything out of it. And so, here's some numbers for you. It is true that about 40% of the devs are working on Squadron, but Squadron-specific deliverables, so only 40%, which accounts for 25% of the actual number of deliverables on the roadmap. So that's 40% of the devs, but only 25% of the deliverables. Most
And a
these
lot of
being
those are
worked on
the
individual
chapter
chapters,
work.
So that,
Yeah.
and that's 28 chapters. So that's 28 deliverables, hundreds of devs, not all at the same time. 29% of deliverables are shared. So almost a third of everything on the roadmap is shared between both games.
Those things that we're just going over.
List above.
Largely.
Yes. We just went through every single team, not every single team, but a lot of the teams that were specifically called out by CIG as being primarily focused to get things done for Squadron first. So, and 46% of all deliverable, or not deliverable, I believe that's 46% of dev? I don't know if that's deliverables or devs. I lost the thought. Anyway, 46% of one of those two things is Star Citizen specific. So much less than it's actually being Squadron focused as far as the entire brunt of the company. It actually leans towards being Star Citizen focused, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. The cash cow currently is Star Citizen. This is as of the April 19th roadmap roundup, and fluctuates a little here and there as new things get added on whichever team. So for instance, if we get like a quarter where they start announcing the new ships, it's going to be more Star Citizen focused. Or if they just found something, or we got to a point where they just added a whole bunch of work for Squadron because they are at a point where they need to start adding tasks to get something else done, it'll lean a bit towards that time. But generally, it works out to a little bit over 45% Star Citizen, a little over 40%, or a little somewhere near 40% for Squadron, specific on either side. To follow this information, or to find this information, she just went through that. So it's shinetracker.app, let's go to deliverables, and extra analysis. This is a invaluable tool for those who are trying to get the bigger picture of not just the features that are coming out, or the updates that are coming out, or when Squadron's going to release, but the big picture on what CIG and the entire company is doing. Because, like, nobody's done this before. Nobody said, I'm going to build a company, and people just throw money at them and give them zero, not tied to deadlines, basically. Nobody's done this. So the CIG is also having to do the work to figure out what that looks like. Because if you're under a big publisher, you have two things: limited budget and limited time. If you're an independent studio like Kojima Productions, because Konami is the old production company. Kojima Productions, he was given the money, but he said, I'm going to do it my way, so he didn't give himself an end date. Whenever it was done, it was done. So, Star Citizen has the theoretical infinite budget, but also they're not going to beholden themselves to an unrealistic time. They're going to be done when they're done. So they're also trying to figure out their way. So, in reality, the devs' effort is essentially relatively split. But the frustration comes from the current state of persistent news, as we talked about earlier, due to PS and different things in the game being very unstable. Though personally, though it's been really hard, I have been playing more these last 2 weeks than I've played through the entire PTU. And for those who know what I did in the PTU, I was on the PTU a lot. Because it was, PS just changed the game. And we've seen over the course of 3.18, 3.18.1, 3.18.2, and the patches since, it's gotten a lot better. There are, still a lot of bumps to go, but it's going to get better. It's going to continue to iron out these giant hurdles because, like Tree said at the top of the show, it's a new technology. Nobody in the game industry said, that stuff that, is used after items are used, like glass bottles from potions? Why don't we just, keep those around forever? Or, the package after you eat a burrito. Obviously that's not something they have in Star Citizen, but, that's the kind of, that we have real trash in the game. No other game is making real litter, and that it's not only a amazing feature, but tack onto a feature. It also facilitates things like decorating your ship dynamically, which is stuff you find around. I really look forward to ships that when they come out to not have items in them. The Pisces C8R ships, you have a fully stocked medical cabinet, but it's not static. You can open the door and take all the stuff out. I know this because I found a C8R that somebody had dropped at lost in a bunker. I'm like, free medical supplies and hoarded all this stuff. Because you could do that. It's there. It exists. But also, if you're the owner of the C8R, you can stock it.
Who says Grabby Hands is gone? You are Grabby Hands.
I am Grabby. For those who own the ships, with those cabinets, with these different places to put medical supplies and food and things, you can eventually, when the ships all get updated to actually use this tech, put food in there so that you can stock your ship. It's quite an amazing technology, and eventually we'll get bigger stuff like furniture and houseplants, and we already saw that they're looking at posts and things. So it will eventually iron out. It's just rough right now because
it's an iterative process.
Something no one's tried.
Yeah, it's an iterative process, and they purposefully, they needed to stress the hell out of it to see where it would break. And once you figure out where it breaks, then you can fix those breakages, and move on. And yeah, it's painful right now, but this is just temporary. Like all the other headaches we've been through, this isn't new. It's really it's harder right now, just because of where we were before. But again, they're gonna get through it.
This sounds a lot like the time around 3.0. I don't know if you were around the community a lot during 3.0, but
yeah,
when 3.0 came out, everything was broken. Like 2.6 came out and came and went, and 3.0 came out, everything was broken. Everything was just bad. Everyone was all up in arms because the game was just unplayable. Because they were running servers now. Like, there was a lot to run, and they were a much smaller company, and they could just not do the internal testing needed to figure out where the limit was for a server. So as we find this new limit, and one of the really good landmarks for what's going on the servers, they haven't dropped the player count. They never said, "Oh, servers are getting really taxed, we're going to drop the player count." They've never said that. Server caps are still at 100. So it's not the player count, which means there's something else they're working on that's going to eventually get ironed out. So by the end of the year, and by the end of the year, I mean first half of next year, server meshing exists. And they need all that to be in place for it. Which I imagine, get ready for it, it's going to be also broken.
Yeah.
I imagine just you're going to cross the border, you're going to lose all your stuff. That's just going to happen. But yeah. Where are we at?
So I talked about CitizenCon, and there was a reason. A big part of the theme of CitizenCon was the partner development, showing off what those teams were working on, so that way people understand, hey, this is what they've been working on. This is what you're going to have in the PU, in the not too distant future. We're still working on it. It still needs some work, but that's what they're highlighting so much of. And the features that they really showed off were master modes, FPS radar scanning, and player interaction experience. Ladders Tier 1, player interaction experience Tier 0, which is the hints, and the other thing I forget. So they didn't show off the lockers, and I forget what the Tier 2 is. Ladders Tier 1, Mantle Tier 2, EVA Tier 2, hover trolleys, which were recently demoed in an ISC with the law offices for Bounty Hunter V2. So it's a thing. map and radar system rework and the mobiGlas rework. We saw all those things, and we saw them last fall. It's been 7 months, and they're continuing to work on these things and have moved on to work on other things. So the development post this change is in a good place. So what I did is I downloaded the entire. Come on, interwebs. I should have downloaded this. So I downloaded the entire partner development presentation, as well as I don't know if I haven't North End Trooper. I'm actually behind on the leaks just because there's been so much news recently that I haven't gotten to read it all. So I don't, and that's the thing, is a lot of these things may not get shown off as part of, or may not get they could get dropped in. We don't know. And so I made this video. It's just shy of 15 minutes long. We're not going to watch the whole thing. What we'll do is we'll watch a little bit and I'll click on to the next segment. But the link to this video, it's unlisted on my YouTube. The link to this video, if you don't want to watch... Huh?
Right before you get into that, I'm now at chapter 11. All but the vehicle work has been downstream. On every single deliverable. For all the chapters.
Oh, that's good.
Up to chapter 11, everything has been downstream, except for vehicle work.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's a good thing.
Quite shocking, actually, to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it continues. It continues, like everything's downstream still.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play... We'll get through this in a few minutes. We won't watch the whole thing, and I'll just show you little bits and pieces so you can see. But what I did is I kept the audio, the voice, the descriptions with each segment, so you can hear what they're talking about. And so if you didn't want to watch the whole partner development video, because it's 2+ hours long, and I think that's where a lot of this information got lost, is because everybody just checked out. And, you checked out, and then people would go back and they'll watch the little clips and stuff like that. But you don't, when something's that long and you're not really interested, especially at the end of CitizenCon when you're tired and you don't want to hear Richard Tyrer and CR talk for 2 hours, because the majority of it is talking. So a lot of the appropriate context was removed, just by our own bias, because we just didn't want to hear anything else. We wanted to see stuff, and so I took out the see stuff part.
This was like my highlight.
Oh, I struggled to get through it the first time around, but I've watched it like 5 times now, and that's why I'm like, God, so many people only watch this once, and they didn't watch it critically. In order to watch something critically or read something critically, you have to go through it multiple times.
How my CitizenCon experience was, basically I checked out during the whole Planet Tech stuff, and then when Chris started talking, I'm like, this is why I watch CitizenCon. Like, this is why I watch it right here. Chris talking about his project, right?
But the details are what goes in one ear and out the other, for most people.
Right.
The speech that you can reach.
I totally was very tired at that point, but I definitely went back and watched a lot of it, if not all of it, at least once more, if not twice more. Like there's a lot of good information here, because it's not just, oh, this is what we're working on, but this is how we're working on it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the how in there.
I would have to go back like every 30 seconds and rewatch part of it, but I'll rewatch with the closed captioning on so I can read it as they're saying it so it sticks in my brain. But there's a lot of really good context in this, and so I just want to play through to remind everyone that this is what they've been working on, and this is the stuff that there's going to get ported over to the PU, in the not too distant future once they, finish up with these features.
CM are somewhat limited, somewhere between 200 and 300 meters per second, tuning pending. But this is basically the hard cap, which you cannot not really exceed. You can slightly exceed this by using boost, but you cannot maintain any velocity beyond that SEM limit for a longer period of time. The second mode is quantum control mode, or QCM or QM. What this mode does is it unlocks your maximum velocity that your ship can reach. So when you were limited before to 200 to 300 meters per second, now you can go to 1200, 1400 meters per second, whatever your ship allows you.
So we've created this feature called Quantum Boost, which is available in the Quantum mode, and you can access it at any point. So at any point you want to kind of boost towards your location that you're kind of looking at, but it's just too far away. And this boost is available for a limited amount of time, and it's purely on a straight line.
Just to give you like a ballpark, Quantum Boost will allow you to go to a target fast if it's within, let's say, 50,000 kilometers, whereas you will use Quantum Travel to do very long range jumps between planets.
So obviously Master Modes is going to have a big impact on the game. But with what they're showing with Master Modes, does it look like that is something that's going to be difficult to move over to the PU? It's just a mode of travel, and they test it out, and then they just, you apply it to ships, and they test it out on different ships. Yeah. But this isn't one of those things where it's a massive feature that requires a whole bunch of rework in order to incorporate it into the code of the game. It's like, no, this is just this is what happens when you do this. And it isn't different from ship to ship other than, top speed this, and that sort of thing, little bits of information that they put in under the hood. And this is the FPS, radar, and scanning player interaction experience tier 0.
So you can see here, this is in Asiado, which we've already showcased. This is obviously going in and utilizing some of our new building blocks UI for the doors. And then here's a scan wave, and you can see that I'm looking at that data pad, and then you can move around, and it's giving me that information. So right now, it's just giving you the basic high-level information in terms of the names and things. But you will also have more detailed information depending on, contextually what the item is. And what you're seeing here is part of the player interaction system. So you can just, even though that's kind of a complex area, there's lots of little things that you can interact with, but you're getting confidence of, oh, cool, I can grab that, or I can use the data pad. And you're not having to go into interact mode. You're not having to be driven by the cursor. You can go in and just press F or interact with it. And you've probably seen this in plenty of AAA games, but they don't have the detail and at scale that we do. So we wanted to make sure that system is really robust. But hopefully it gives you kind of an idea of.
And I'd also say that.
So this is really interesting because they made an entire team for making things interactable. And that team is going through and making new things that will be interactable, as well as taking things that are already in game and making them interactable to be a part of this. They're also have been doing this for a while now, where things that will have this context and fit into this system. They've been making things that so that way it'll function with this system in mind, because they knew they were going to be doing it for a while now. So this isn't it's a new feature, but they have been planning and working alongside the goal of this feature for a long time. So let's go on to this part.
Okay, what I was gonna say something about, but Northern True said no more jousting. Finally, yes.
No more what? Oh, jousting. Yeah.
No more jousting. If you haven't had a dogfight under 400 meters a second, it is so nice to play. You, go into go into PU or go into one of the arcade modes and purposely get under SCM and dogfight. It is so fun, especially if you're fighting, let's say, Cutlass and you're an arrow. You can just sneak in behind him. Perfect.
This is part of a larger project, because people will complain about ship desync a lot. Well, if ships aren't going as fast, the server doesn't have to update the position as often, and the changes aren't that drastic. So this helps with the desync problem that's in game right now. And there's also the actor status network rework or something like that. I forget how it's all broken down, but there's additional development that will be done on that post server meshing to help with the desync as well. But if by slowing down combat and slowing down movement, when it's when it's important for you to be able to notice the difference, in combat, that's how you improve the desync, or at least the as well as the perception of desync. The other thing is they also have another part of the rework for server meshing. In order, they made it so that way all the, I guess you call them little particles for ammo, for munitions. When you shoot your guns on your ships, that those are as lightweight as possible in terms of information, so that way they can have tons and tons of them on screen, and the servers can still track that track that information. So let's look at the movement stuff.
So obviously this, as you can see, this is final art.
Absolutely.
So this is taken directly from Squadron 42. No, it's obviously a test map. But you can see here that, as Chris said, the level of inertia is still block out phase, but you can see that we're actually starting to get that you can grab on, you can go straight into a mantle or a vault, you can go straight into the pull-ups. And the thing is that what you're seeing here is, while this is just an test map, a lot of these are providing design ethos to then feed into the PU. So if we've got derelicts and we've got environments that we want the player to go and do missions in, we don't just necessarily just have to rely on, you've only got jump, or you only can do vault and mantle.
And right there, we did a jump onto halfway onto a ladder, and here we're looking around.
And this is just a diegetic system that works with any surface. The way they're building it, so it isn't, you have to put in a specific surface for you to be able to grab onto. It's anything that's a ledge. They're reworking it so that way you go into a cave or whatever, and they don't have to use a bespoke asset while they're building a level in order to create obstacles that you can mantle and climb on like that. It's being built so that way it's a systemic in mind.
Yep. The only thing I didn't see is a Kong. If they can put the Kong in there, it's perfect. I don't know if you know what that is.
Well,
but
and as Chris
when
says,
you,
in terms of
run, let's say at a picnic table, you use your hands to basically throw yourself over it as you kind of go over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's it?
It's kind of like a super mantle.
Yeah. Parkour. But again, EVA Tier 2. There is no bespoke version of EVA between the two games. It's all the same thing. Once it's done, they add it to the dev branch for the PU, and it's in.
Here we go.
The EVA. This is what you're seeing here is that you'll probably see some of it in the third person. The thrusters are not firing because
it's
decoupled.
the old VFX, but it's also the old VFX code. So we haven't part of the proper. This is a current PU suit versus what we'll have is a new one with the proper pack that has the thrusters in the right position, and when you go forward, the thrusters going from the back.
So what you're actually seeing here is you've actually connected to this surface. So now it's almost like you're in a prone situation, but this is going to be what more our new prone will be. Again, you've got full 360 degrees. You can just move your mouse and you look all the way behind you or all the way in front.
And right now we're moving along here, not because we're thrusting, because we're using our hands to move ourselves along, and we're looking around as we're doing that. If we went out to the third person here, you would sort of see us moving our hands around. I think we'll see it a little later on. There we go, here we go. So we're just sort of pulling ourselves along. And if we wanted to at this point, we could stop and we could push off against it, and then we would just go floating out into space. So that's the sort of idea of what we call push-pull.
And
Zero
so
G push pull.
He just pushed himself off.
So what you're seeing here, that's actually kind of, you're just floating alongside the actual, this fin of this Asiata station. And this is actually keeping you in this orbit. And then if you did, and that's just, you just push forward and go, where you can actually jump off into space. But then this becomes one of the, if you look at physical traversal where you've got jumping and mantling.
So, Amchuka, you say this. This is one of the things I talk about in my upcoming boarding video. This is why I'm excited for this feature alongside FPS devices Tier 1, cutting Tier 2, hacking. Oh gosh, I thought there was another thing. I think there's 4 features that are being worked on as part of Squadron 42 that they're building out to be, a complete feature as part of Squadron 42 that are going to be integral to boarding, and boarding long before the Legionnaire is going to get into game. but being able to have this new EVA system, particularly for stealth boarding options, being able to cut through airlock doors. We don't know how far freeform cutting is going to go, but cut through, definitely airlock doors in order to gain entry or hack the doors. The gameplay potential for boarding actions, and not just ships, but there are going to be boarding actions for stations. It's one of the things that they've talked about, stations and facilities. And when they say facilities, they're talking about asteroid facilities, anything out in space that you can board. And so you can see what the potential for boarding is like with features like this in game.
Stations are just big stationary ships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with lots of airlocks and lots of ships flying around, and no one's going to notice little old you gliding in to go in and then hack the door and make entry and sneak through the level in order to find the mission thing that you're looking for to steal from whatever pirate gang. Because I talked about this in Pyro gameplay and the development of the stations in Pyro, how they wanted sneaky traversal options for missions and gameplay. So hover trolleys, I put this in there just because we recently saw it in ISC with the law offices. But I am excited about hover trolleys because these are things that are going to be able to be used for moving patients.
Let's play the
People
video.
who need
See
rescue.
Let's say the video there, and
We've
you
hyped
can
this
see it.
up now. Hover trolleys are the most amazing thing in the world.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So you can see here, this is actually a slaver pod. So
It closes down, it's on the floor. We're going to activate it. Lever takes up now, grav levers on. You get hold of it, bam. And by the way, the new interaction system's not working in this demo here. This is a separate build. But we're, as you can see, it's getting pushed over
bulkheads. But this is essentially a really big improvement for us because we want physical cargo, and we want physical cargo to be a big deal in the PU, that you have to move that cargo, you have to make decisions on how long it's going to take to load it up, not just buy it from a kiosk and it appear in your ship. So this gives us the ability to do that, and like Chris says, move much larger things than what you'd normally be able to push as a human being.
Yeah, I mean, this happens to be just a slaver pod, but obviously you'd be pushing, as long as it's grav lever equipped and has the sort of hover device, then like I said, you could have large shipping containers.
I'm letting this one play through just because this is something that I'm ridiculously
technology, so the same
excited about.
Dragonfly, or eventually you'll hopefully be able to move much larger ships if you need to rearrange them, or when you're moving things around on your homestead or whatever we do eventually.
I want to know, can you get running?
And we've actually had this working on a planet, so you can just push this over planet terrain. You don't let go. You stay stable because it doesn't actually undulate unless there's something actually.
That's the Asiato hanger.
So it allows it to be much more stable. And what we want to do for your cargo loading is that we'll use a system similar to the cargo grid that you'll be able to snap things on top of it. So if you have a flat platform, you'll be able to snap cargo boxes onto it so they won't fall off. Then you'll be able to reliably move them without frustration. And again, you can see some of our design ethos coming through is that we're trying to remove the barrier to entry, we're trying to remove the control mechanism, the things that frustrate you as you play the game, and kind of make that a lot simpler.
Huge quality of life thing.
Spock and the photon torpedo.
Real quick, I'm gonna fix my camera. Why is it?
Yeah.
It says I'm not running Elgato, but I am.
Yeah. And in addition to that,
they
said
actually...
in that specific demo they weren't running the what's it called? The interaction demo that we just saw earlier. So on top of that, you'll be able to walk up and not have to use the mouse, but just start pushing it. Not like it will still be a button, but it'll assume what control you're trying to hit. So as we go through these, try and remember all the previous things we're talking about, because it all collapses down into almost a finished product on Star Citizen side, and a finished product on Squadron side. That's the whole point of this entire thing, is they're finishing Squadron, and Star Citizen gets all the benefits of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we run it, you'll see kind of what the tech is. So first, this is in the editor, but it's essentially what it does is it's taking our existing layouts, levels, ships, so we don't have to build this custom, but it's a way of applying certain shaders and marking up certain objects to be displayed, like the floor gets displayed but the walls don't. So we can just take the existing geometry you already have streamed in that you're walking around already, and then use it to be rendered for our minimap. So this is essentially in the engine using the Idris ship itself and the various parts of its interior to create the minimap without any special. This doesn't have any specific custom like UI art for it, other than some of the like level things that say, ground level or whatever.
It's one of the advantages of having high detailed ships.
Yeah.
Because the environment's already in a good state to show straight out the gate.
And so the idea of this being systemic is that when it's the feature and is ready to go, ready for prime time, we can just apply it to space station.
Yeah, because a lot of traditional game development, you have to make custom minimaps.
Yeah.
So you look at an environment and you go, we have to make a custom environment minimap. So if we want to support lots, tens, hundreds, and thousands of locations,
especially for the PU,
and absolutely for the PU, it's just not viable. So we wanted to come up with a solution that we can use, with minimal effort on the side of content creation, but gives us all of the information that we want. And this minimap is not just, oh, that's where I am. It can show you objectives, it can show you other people, it can show you information about those things. And again, it's all underpinned by the radar and scanner. So when we call it the minimap, this is just a kind of how you view your radar information in FPS. And your radar and scanner gives you so much more information than just, oh, that's the name of the door. It tells you what's the state, does it have power, can I hack it? If it's a person, what's their active status, are they injured? So if you're coming into here and going, I'm trying to do a medical mission, I've got a marker, I can go, cool, I can get a scan of the local lie of the area and go, right, this person's injured. Oh, his body's injured too. Oh, he's got a tier 1 injury. I'm going to go and help him before he bleeds out because I can see his health. And you'll be able to see that via this information.
Yeah, it allows you to detect
It's a holistic and procedural system. And so you go into a new environment in the game and you press your little radar button for your FPS radar, and it will pop up, what's around you looking like this based off the range of your radar, how far out you can ping. It'll show you the contextual information that you're able to see using your radar and ping system, the scanning system. And it doesn't require bespoke anything. It's just building it for it to be holistic and procedural, to be able to be used, in the PU, in follow-on episodes of Squadron 42, the whole thing. And here's the Mobiglass rework.
So the first page that you'll see that's coming up right now is kind of like the overview. So, it's the overview of your player, it's the overview of your ship, and then it's like your primary objective. So, and all of these widgets that we call them are kind of shortcuts to the kind of the main focus areas.
See alerts as you go to the other page.
So you can see here we've got your messages. So this is kind of like the email client, and then on the right we've got kind of like the ship chat that's coming in with general ship chat from the AI, which again is kind of just making it believe that you're in this believable environment or a real life environment rather than just you alone.
So responsive compared to the old one.
Yeah, and it's just a lot cleaner, and the information, it's something that we've tried to be consistent across the HUD and the Mobi, is that we want to make sure that we're giving you clean information.
And you can see like the alerts.
So you can see how the progress on these features, and this is just some of them, it has been really good and it's looking really great. And this was 7-8 months ago. Well, this is what they showed it to us over 7 months ago. This video was likely prepared 8-9 months ago, maybe longer. And so you can imagine the other features that they're working on are at similar or even more advanced levels of production, And so it's a lot to be excited about, but it makes all that, makes the reprioritization worthwhile, because even though we don't see it, coming in every quarter, it means that, okay, instead of having little tidbits every quarter, we're going to get, a full feature, a complete feature, a feature that is being built in a much more holistic, with a much more holistic mindset and complete mindset, for design and for use in both games, drop in, and it's going to make a big difference. And so it's still PU work. It's not Squadron work. It's Squadron NP. It's for both games because they share the same assets. They share the same technology. They share the same engine. So it's a giant misnomer to say that, it's a lie to say that 90% of the team is working on Squadron. Even if you counted, the shared deliverables with the, Squadron only deliverables, it wouldn't be 90% of the team. So it's, you're looking at the split is actually much more even, and this work is going to, it's taking time because it's going to be more finished, but it's going to benefit the PU in a really big way. There's so many things that they're working on right now that are going to make a big difference in our quality of life and our gameplay going forward. We just have one last little thing to show you, and then we're going to move on to the scanner anomaly. So all of this, I had a discussion with a person on Twitter who will remain unnamed, who is like, I don't want to call him out because, again, the feeling is valid, but the feeling comes from a place of being not fully informed. It is this is my emotional reaction to this based off of incomplete information, which I get, and, it's, if you have, if you only have a limited view of the information of the development of this project, it's easy to react emotionally and be upset, especially given the context of 3.18 and 3.18.2 and PES, and so I totally get it, but at the same time, what we've been showing you, this is why these things are being developed. This is why they're being developed in this way. And Squadron 42 isn't a waste of money or anything. It's being developed using the same technology that will be in the PU, and they'll be able to make, finally finish episode 1, but then turn around and make episode 2 and 3 in a lot shorter period of time, because they don't have to remake these features. The features are done. They don't have to remake a lot of the assets, because a lot of these assets, a lot of these assets are done, like the ships. And a lot of the assets that they'll make that are new, they'll reuse a whole bunch of pieces, for it, in order to build, new locations. And so you're going to see a much smaller team working on the future episodes of Squadron 42, Episode 2 and Episode 3 going forward, but they'll also be able to do it in a shorter period of time. And now all that effort, all the investment in the research and development to build things like this, to build these holistic systems, is going to pay dividends, because now it's done, and now you can have a Episode 2 of Squadron 42 that, from a man-hours perspective, takes 3 years for a smaller team, and really production-wise only, costs several $1 million or, low tens or whatever, but then it sells several million copies and brings in 100 million, 150 million, 200 million, however much money towards the development of the PU. That goes into CIG, who is able to sustain the massive team that they're building to build out the PU. That's why they're built, that's part of the diverse funding model that we talked about recently in a recent episode. The having multiple ways to bring in revenue in order to support a huge team. Because we talked about in that video how Manchester alone, by the end of 2026, their goal for Manchester, that one studio, is to be 1,300 people. Which means by that same time, with the growth from the other teams, you're looking at, 1,700 to 2,000 total people. And who knows, including Turbulent. we're looking, by the end of 2026, I talked about in the video, where you're looking at, close to $200 million easy in operating costs for CIG. And that's where where these episodes of Squadron 42 come in, that they can churn them out much more cheaply once the initial investment in the technology and the assets is done, in order to bring in a lot more money that will sustain the company as they continue to expand the universe and grow the PU. So let's listen to this little quote.
On top of that,
go for it.
Even after Squadron 42 Episode 3 is out the door, you don't have to rebuild the foundation for Squadron, 10, Marine Group, however they number them, Outlaw Story A, whatever they want to do next. You don't have to rebuild the game to build it. It's just going to be a whole ton of art, cinematics, mocap, and use the foundation that's already laid out. So it will be a much easier turnaround to get the next themed single player with the foundation being finished in Squadron 42 Episode 1, improved on in Episode 2, finalized in Episode 3. All the while, they still have Star Citizen they're building, and will continue to build, as they've said, until they run out of money. And then they make, we get a Navy-based military space opera for Squadron, but what about our, gritty, backstabbing, scoundrel game later, or whatever else they do? Maybe they want to do a small personal story. Whatever they do, it's much easier to build.
Let's listen to this quote real quick. It's from 5 years ago, but at the same time, this is a statement and a theme that has been reiterated for years as part of the plan, and why they're doing all this initial investment into building out the tech, building out these assets that they can use, building the ships and locations, and building out their workflow so that they can do this.
I mean, we are actually starting right now the very early stages of, we had an outline of, 1, 2, and 3, and now we're in the process of starting to flesh out 2 and 3, because our goal would be to get 2 and 3 written, and then probably shoot all the performance cap back to back. And then once we have episode 1 out and done with all the technology there, 2 and 3 won't necessarily be, as long a process, right? Because we've had to build all this technology that didn't exist before. We really want to push it, and so we've been focusing on building tools. But once the tools are in place, 2 and 3 they're not going to happen in overnight, but they will happen a lot quicker than 1 did. I mean, it's very similar to the way, say, Wing Commander 2 was from Wing Commander 1, because it built on all the foundation of Wing Commander 1's code, and then we sort of saw what worked in Wing Commander 1 and said, okay, well, let's push much more of this story, a bit more of a sort of constructed narrative, more relationship.
And he rambles on, but this is how game developers, how companies make sequels and follow-on games, where, okay, they've continued the story, or they've, made a new game with a 5-6 hour single player campaign and new multiplayer maps and new multiplayer game modes, and they're able to churn out a new game every 2 to 3 years, because this is a standard practice in game development. This is why Aaron Roberts was brought in, his brother, because Aaron Roberts basically, ran much of the team that built the Lego games, and they have churned out so many dang Lego games, and they're all fun, they're all interesting, but they're all built on the same technology, because you build the technology, you build the tools, you build that stuff once, and then you're able to churn out more and more products, that use that same initial investment, and you just keep on selling more and more, and you're, the profit margin from doing so gets wider and wider each time. Especially as you continue to practice it and people get more experience and such. This is part of, part of the reason they're building such a big studio is to build out the PU using the tools, because they're going to need a lot of people to use all these tools to build 100 systems and build more ships and build out the gameplay and the missions and contracts and all that. But they're also going to need a lot of people, need people to make, single player campaigns, and more maps for the arena modes, all that. Yeah, the Lego games are great. I love them. But that's the concept, and it isn't a new thing. This is every company does this because it makes it more. It makes the initial investment more profitable. Yeah, this is how you make more money off of that initial investment, is by making more games using the tech, using the tools, using the assets you already built. It's standard practice. So.
And I know you said you don't like to call people out. However, Northern Trooper is getting called out today because he said in chat, dead serious, Squadron 42 to be announced at this CitizenCon and to be released next November. I'm calling it. I bet 12 crayons. I'm saving this image, and I will hold you to this, sir.
Yeah, Blizzard, can we clip that? Yeah. But that is it for the scanner anomaly. And we are already 2 hours in. So we're going to transition. We'll come back to this screen. And that helps remind me that it's at about the 2 hour mark. So that way when I edit this down for YouTube. But yeah, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for helping, for hanging out as part of the Spectrum Pulse and being a part of the discussion and listening to Naz and I provide some context to the situation of what's going on right now in the Star Citizen community. And I think that understanding how things are being developed and why they're being developed in the way they are will go to help assuage a lot of people's grief regarding the state of Star Citizen right now. And going forward, just knowing that these things are coming and that the work and it will bear fruit. There's a method to the madness, and we just went over all that for the scanner anomaly this evening. And Nazeris, thanks so much for helping with all that and helping make sense of it all. Always appreciate it. So the scanner anomaly this evening is my scanner anomaly, and if you've seen me talking in AstroPub's Discord or in my own Discord, you know that I have opinions about medical gameplay. Weird. And for reference, in real life, I am a critical care flight paramedic, both civilian and in the Army. So I fly around in helicopters and planes, providing ICU level care to patients going from one place to another, whether it's from a scene call or picking up at a hospital in the ER or their ICU, going to another ICU and a bigger hospital. This is what I do. And so let me pull this stuff up. Whoop. And then we'll transition back over to the other screen, and we're going to talk about medical gameplay. Yeah. So 1 second.
Also, check Discord.
Oh, checking Discord. Give me 1 second. Oh boy. Notifications.
There you
go.
Hey, caught it. Yes. Northern Trooper. 12 grades. Oh man, I mean, well, we know where Blizzard votes. Honestly, I'm not like too off on his prediction. I do expect some form of announcement or pre-announcement at CitizenCon.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know if it's gonna be releasing a game is playing 4D chess. Go watch Star Trek and watch them try and play 4D chess. I'll go what it was Data, not 4D chess specifically, but there was a game that Data played against, and the whole episode was about learning how to con people with egos, basically, but losing strategically, and that's kind of what the game releasing is, because there are some games you do not release next to.
Yeah,
Call of Duty, Madden. There's just some things you don't release next to, right? And depending on what comes out this year or next,
Starfield maybe this year next. You don't release next to it. You're not gonna release. Don't release next to anything with Bethesda on it. So you're trying to predict when other games will be out, but then every game's getting delayed, and so you end up with this again 4D chess-like kind of thing, and you need to figure out how to place your game on this ever-moving dartboard that's going to give it enough time to like a snowball roll down the hill without people going, oh, okay, next thing's out, the thing I was waiting for, I just bought this. Yeah, so not just like it'll be out in November. If they need to like postpone it to get a better month or a better quarter, they will, and they should. If it comes out not 2024 but 25, but in the first half or the middle of the year, it's they have a lot of marketing strategy to go for that one. So I don't envy them. I need to buy a starter pack with Squadron 42. If I remember correctly, those only go on sale during events, and that will be the 19th, 20th for the start of Invictus next month. But as far as I know, they don't do those normally anymore, unless you want to go to gray market for it. Which I am so neutral now on the gray market. If CIG really didn't want the gray market, they have things they could do to make it go away. So I don't know. As long as people don't get scammed, I can't be too down on it. During events only, you can buy Squadron 40 standalone. Is that two separate things? During events, you can get both, but not during events. You can get the Squadron 42. I was super grandfathered. I don't know if I get Squadron. I think I get Squadron. I think everyone who spends over $1,000 on ships gets both of the games free. If they don't, then I need to I'll look that up. Anyway, I have to make my exit. I have work early tomorrow, and this is mostly this is all tree. I could interject, but that'd be just cutting them off. So good night, everyone in chat. I will see you guys next week for roadmap.
Yeah, we got a roadmap on Wednesday, so next week.
And then yeah, and then we also got reports coming out soon.
Oh yeah, we have roadmap and reports on Wednesday. No, that'll be too long.
Yeah.
Okay,
fine. All right. Well, I'll see you next week for at least one of them.
Yeah. Thank you, Naz. Appreciate you. Have a good shift tomorrow. Everyone. I'll see you later.
It won't be. Don't worry.
Don't worry. I'm going to transition us to the other screen, and we'll get started with the scanner anomaly. Have a good night, Naz.
Good night. I'm trying to figure out where I have my camera set up.
Alrighty, so taking it back out of studio mode. Okay. So, like I said, I have opinions about medical gameplay because it is what I do. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to do what I do in real life. A lot of people that say they don't want to do what they do in real life and start, in video games and stuff. A lot of them probably don't like their jobs. And I actually, I do enjoy my job. It comes with a lot of challenges, and it can be very stressful sometimes. But I really enjoy my job. I enjoy the challenge of it. I find it very mentally stimulating and rewarding. And so that's why I'm excited about medical gameplay in Star Citizen. And we have a little bit of medical gameplay in Star Citizen, but we are at healing tier 0. So there's a lot more coming to medical gameplay and actor status in the future. But what we have right now in game is because that's what was needed. That's what was needed for Squadron 42. Blizzard, we're going to get to the beam, and you're going to understand why I'm anti-medical beam. And I think I made a pretty good case for it. But that's just one thing, one of my suggestions where CIG can going forward, things that they can do to make medical gameplay really interesting as well as engaging and challenging without being sweaty try hard, because that's one thing that a lot of people say is like, oh, okay, well you do this in real life, you want it to be super sim like. No, I don't want that. What I do in real life is very complicated, and I don't want it to be complicated. I want it to be simplistic and fun, but at the same time I don't want it to be Battlefield or Call of Duty healing. I want it to be somewhere in the middle, where we can have an expectation of being engaged, and allow people who want to go that extra mile with their gameplay to do so. So we're going to start with on this page that I have up right now. And medical gameplay, we're going to have a little bit of a preamble before we go into what they do right and where they can go going forward. But medical gameplay in SC is really broken down into two segments. And the first segment is the treatment of symptoms for the actual illness or injury. And I say illness or injury because it's not just going to be injuries that you have to take care of due to medical gameplay in the future. It's going to be, let's see, leave that. We're also going to have illnesses. That's something that they've talked about. It's something that's in the lore. It makes sense because people get sick all the time in real life. It isn't just people don't go to the hospital just because they get hurt. But so the things that you use to treat symptoms, and I specify symptoms because all they do is these things. You use them in order to treat the symptoms of the injury or the illness, but it doesn't cure or heal the injury or the illness. And so those symptoms are part of the actor status system. Those sort of different things that impact your ability to play the game, make it more challenging, provide sort of a more immersive debuff style system. And so you have your medical pens, and medical pens are something you can use it on yourself, you can use it on someone else, but they come in multiple different flavors. You also have the multi-tool, which allows you to use the just one drug, which is Hemazol, but it lets you do it at a distance for now. But it's an attachment for your multi-tool that lets you provide the drug Hemazol. And then you have the Cure Life Medical Tool, which allows you to not only use the basic mode, which just applies Hemazol, it also allows you to scan players and figure out more about their injuries. It's a very basic scan. I think it's going to get a little bit more in depth, not too much, but just a little, provide a little bit more context in the future. But it also allows you to administer the other drugs in specific amounts to treat those symptoms. And so that's why this image is important right here, because you can see that you can go from basic to advanced mode like this. And you can, there's your basic mode, here's the blood drug level, and the health of whatever it is that you're scanning, and this is how you just administer Hemazol only. And then here is the advanced mode, and you can dial in how much each drug you want to administer. And the reason this is cool to me is because these things showing how much health you're going to regain on a injured leg, or how much of each drug you're going to give. They show you on a bar how much you're going to give in an amount based off of this is how big this dose is going to be. But this is also gives you a timer, and that timer gives you information on how long the patient is going to experience the relief from symptoms given this amount of drug. And then you're also going to, based off of how much you're going to give, it gives you context on you have to worry about the patient's blood drug level. And this is a real concept. This is something that I love about what CIG does with their development of different aspects of gameplay, in that they do research and they develop something to take it all the way out to sim and then bring it back to fun. And they have done their research and found out that, we can take a concept like pharmacokinetics, which is something that I lecture on to flight paramedics and nurses, and we can take it all the way out to sim and then bring it back to fun by allowing players to use stuff like this to have a lot of player agency and choice, as well as risk and reward involved in their decisions. It encourages players to understand how the system works in order to get the most benefit out of it. Or you can just do the simple mode. And so what happens with pharmacokinetics is, it's not called the blood drug level, but what you have is the concentration within your blood plasma. A lot of you probably know that your blood is divided into essentially 3 components. You've got your red blood cells, you have your plasma, and then you have your platelets. And your medications, if you administer a medication, whether it's IV or you take it orally, how much effect you get is based off of how much of it is available in the plasma to act on a receptor site based off of what the drug is. So that's what your blood drug level is. Your blood drug level is a cumulative representation of how much of all of the drugs are available, are essentially in the patient's plasma. And so if you give, you could dial all these up to 11 for somebody that's got, a bunch of injuries, but you're going to overdose them really quick. And so you have to use this device to balance how much you give of each medication in order to get the most bang for your buck for your patient based off of what what's going on. And you don't have to, they've got these destabilizing effects, these debuffs. I want to treat those. I also need to get his health up. But if I give too much of these, it's going to increase his blood drug level over that 50% mark, and he's going to have the overdose symptoms. And I don't want those, because that's going to make it harder for maybe he's part of your squad and he can't stay on mission because he can't really function as well when he's overdosed. But that you want to get his health back up, but I also need to balance that with, okay, I need to get the health up, but I also want to make sure that I am giving them relief from their symptoms, so that way those debuff effects aren't affecting their ability to perform. But that means that, okay, maybe we're not going to give her surgery because that's the drug that detoxes you. But you could have a situation where you're going to give a dose of roxafen and demoxifitrine, and they're only going to get like 4 minutes of relief because you had to give a whole bunch of hemazole to provide, to bring up the health of multiple injuries. And that means you're going to have to redose that person in 4 minutes in order to, otherwise those symptoms are going to come back. But the symptoms come back faster than the blood drug level goes down. So you are on the clock and that clock is shorter depending on how severe your injury is. And that's a really cool system to me, because this is basically exactly how things work in real life, only gamified. And that's why when people say, "Oh, you want this, really complex sim," and I'm like, "No, this is perfect. This is beautiful." They just need to take it farther out beyond this is first aid. This is, you are a combat medic, a Navy corpsman or something like that, and this is what you're doing or you're a industry site medic, because that's a thing too. And this is you providing first aid so that way someone can stay on mission and continue to function, or they can make the extract, or someone can continue to work until you can rendezvous with a medical ship, because you're out on an Orion, or until you guys return back to the station for the day, to unload your hull, and then they can get healing then. That's what this is for, so that way you don't need to get healing. You don't need to get healed. You don't need to be cured quickly. When we can combat these symptoms to allow you to continue to function. But that timer that I talked about, the amount of time that you have to deal with these symptoms, is based off of how severe your injuries are, how much medication you have to give in order to combat the symptoms from those injuries, and then that's going to make your blood drug level rise faster. And so the more injured you are, the less time you're going to have before you're going to have to deal with those symptoms, because your blood drug level won't handle it, and you're going to need to get healing. So that's part of the the team effort, where, okay, you're the medic and you're like, he's got a tier 2 or maybe a tier 1 injury. And based off of the, maybe he's got one tier 1 and one tier 3. Based off of those injuries and the symptoms they've got, I can continue to treat this person for 45 minutes before their blood drug level is going to get too high and they are what we call combat ineffective in the military. But the same thing would happen, on a job site, and you're getting first aid. And that's why I think that this is really interesting because, okay, now you're the medic. You're not only treating the patient, but you're also, going to call for evac, or you're going to, whether you, depending on what's available, maybe you need to call for evac and they have to get taken back to a station, or maybe, there's because all there's available is maybe a C8R or a Cutlass Red and they've got a tier 1 injury. Or maybe, you're able to find, based off of, whatever app that ends up being, or you put out for a beacon, you're like, hey, I need a tier 1 bed. Okay, sweet. And Apollo is nearby and they can be at your be at your position in 10 minutes, 12 minutes. Okay, sweet. That's well within the window of treatment. Either way, regardless of what happens, you can keep them alive, but keeping them alive doesn't keep them in the fight, doesn't keep them productive. For if you're, in a non-combat scenario. So let me go back to my notes. Next we're going to talk briefly about the drugs, and then some potential future drugs that I think would be beneficial to add to the system that we have already, as well as potential future symptoms that would be relevant to gameplay in regards to illness and other things that can happen. So let's go down to, we already talked about drugs and blood drug level. So this is something that I find really interesting and a bit of a misconception that I think people have about how it works. There are no nanobots. I'm sorry, Paul, it's not a thing. I've gone through every citation I can find about medical gameplay. I searched all throughout the Starchives for the videos. Nanobots aren't a thing in Star Citizen. You don't use nanobots for healing. Especially with the medical tools and everything. What you have is Hemazol. And Hemazol, we'll read what it says. Hemazol is the primary drug. Here, I'm going to make this big. Hemazol is the primary drug used by medics and can be found in both a med pen, as well as used by both the Cure Life medical gun and the Lifeguard medical attachment for the multi-tool. This drug can stop bleeding and restore health up to the current maximum, in addition to bringing a person back from incapacitation. Bleeding is stopped with any amount of the drug used. So to me, heme is a prefix that means blood. We use that in medical terminology, and that's another thing that I like. Some of these, the naming conventions that they use for these drugs use actual medical terminologies based off of what it is. Some are more accurate than others, but at least they put effort into making them sound, realistic. But so Hemazol, to me, strikes me as a drug that is used to provide a stasis, homeostasis to your blood, and that it's red, and so in order to restore life to you, restore health, it's basically saying that you have a tier 1 or tier 2 injury to your leg, and you have lost health in that leg. And essentially that means that leg isn't being perfused anymore. It's not getting blood to that leg due to the injury. And so that, to me, that tells me that this is probably contains like synthetic red blood cells, which are what you need to deliver oxygen to the tissues in your body in order for them to be perfusion and have health, essentially be able to function. It also says that it stops bleeding. So to me, that tells me that this also includes probably synthetic clotting factors, which are found in your plasma, as well as synthetic platelets. I'm imagining that they're not using like donated blood, in the 30th century. They have found a way to synthesize these things. But, this is a real thing. When I have somebody that has a significant injury and has lost a lot of blood, yes, I don't just put the blood back in the leg because the leg is hurt, but I do transfusions of blood and blood products in order to stop, either stop and or slow bleeding, as well as restore perfusion to allow improved function of the body, restoring health. So that's why I really like the MedPen and Hemazol, because it's not, this isn't sci-fi hocus pocus. This is just futuristic medicine based off of what we do already, and it makes sense. Yeah. Whole blood, baby. Yeah. Typo negative, low titer whole blood. I carry, on my Blackhawk, I carry 4 units. On my civilian job, we carry 2 units. But I've also, and sometimes we carry plasma with us as well. A lot of times we'll transfuse platelets too. It just depends. We can even do concentrated factor 7, factor 8, this and that, specific clotting factors. Demexitrin. So this one, the name doesn't really fit with what it is, because like Demex, there's a drug called it's dexamethasone. So it sounds more like a corticosteroid, but it's not. It's a synthetic adrenaline, whereas the corticosteroid is Sterogen, which that name is good. So this one is a little bit less accurate, but I can see why they went that route, because there is something to it. So demexitrin is a form of synthetic adrenaline. So like in my line of work, it would be epinephrine, which you're probably familiar with from like allergic reactions. But you also have, adrenaline is the drug name for adrenaline is epinephrine, but that's essentially what it is in your body. But that can be used to relieve muscle fatigue and symptoms related to being concussed. So that's not what we use adrenaline for as far as treatment in real life. But at the same time, you can use stimulants. A illicit example would be the use of meth, as well as the use of meth and other stimulants by the Nazis in World War II, in order to combat fatigue, as well as make them very, very angry. But it helped you combat fatigue, stay awake, and be more focused for long periods of time, especially if you are being exposed to the rigors of combat. So I think that's kind of why they went with this. Essentially, if you gave someone some epinephrine, they're going to have a lot of energy and they're probably not going to feel fatigued. How focus is going to make you feel, I don't know, but I can see where they went with it. But again, you're using demexitrin to treat symptoms. These symptoms that can be associated with different injuries. We're not going to talk about all the injuries. 24/7 anger and situational awareness, that would freak out a mountain lion. Yeah. I've seen a lot of people on a lot of meth, and they do a lot of really weird things. So Roxafen. Roxafen is a painkiller. So to me, the actual drug is called Roxafen, but the pen is opiopen, as in like opioids, which would be like fentanyl, morphine, Dilaudid, things like that we get for pain. And so this one is actually really accurate because, imagine that you have a tier 2 injury. To me, the way they've described tier 2 injuries, like to limbs, it sounds like, okay, you have some soft tissue damage, maybe a little bit of some more superficial tissue bleeding and damage, and a non-displaced fracture. So your bone is fractured in the middle, but it's not like that. It's not separated. It's not comminuted is the term. And so one thing that we do, in the military and in combat medicine is if, you have an injury like that, we're going to, splint your leg or splint your arm in order to prevent the break from getting much worse. But we can give you medication in order to allow you to ignore that pain and continue to move on that splinted limb, with assistance. And this is going to feed into something I'm going to talk about later, because it makes sense in the future where, this is one of my suggestions, but it makes sense where we're wearing this futuristic 30th century combat suits, combat armor, even industrial armor. To me, it makes sense that you would be able to take a medication to blunt that pain, so that way you're able to bear weight on that leg or use that arm that has a non-displaced fracture. But the suit itself, would constrict, not to the point of being a tourniquet, but it would basically form a splint on that arm to prevent further injury. To me, that should be a thing. I think that makes sense. And it would make sense, especially in the context of giving a painkiller in order for you to continue to use that injured limb, to suppress the pain of use, and remove that symptom for a period of time. Sterogen is a corticosteroid that can help relieve symptoms associated with muscle weakness and respiratory damage, such as a chest injury's effects of reduced melee damage or a head injury causing your vision to be blurred. So we don't use corticosteroids to relieve muscle weakness, but if you have inflammation in your muscles, and due to injury, we can give a steroid to remove that inflammation. So it kind of fits. We don't, give it for respiratory damage, but if you are having like an asthma attack or something like that where your lungs are inflamed, we give corticosteroids in order to treat that, to allow you to breathe better. So again, this one, not super, not 100% on point, but it's not far off. So it, and in the future that could be a use for a corticosteroid, but it makes sense, curing, taking care of vision blurring from a head injury, not so much, but it's gamified, so it's totally cool. Resurgera. So this one makes a lot of sense, especially in the context of science fiction. I read a ton of science fiction. I love science fiction. And one thing that's a common theme in science fiction is medications and pills in order to cure a hangover, essentially, or to detox you rapidly. And that's exactly what this is. And I've seen people say, oh, it's basically Narcan. Okay, well, Narcan allows you to reverse it competitively binds with your opioid receptors in order to reverse an opioid overdose. So it basically kicks those off the receptor. Well, that's only one drug. We've got drugs that do similar things for sedative medications and for paralytics. Well, instead of doing that with with individual drugs, they've got a rapid detoxicant, which is much more in line with what you might read in a lot of different science fiction, where it's basically just going to me, the way this works is it would, in lore, the way it would work is it would basically dramatically increase the function and rate of function of your liver, which is what detoxes your blood. Your liver is what will metabolize and help clear medications that are in your blood. It's part of that system, and that's why so much of when you see these sorts of drugs described in science fiction, you're going to get rid of the effects of the drug and get it out of your system. You're going to feel like garbage afterwards, but it'll pass. So it makes sense that we would have this in order to be able to, because if you overdose someone, the overdose is potentially, depending on the setting, worse than the symptoms that they were being treated for, and so you can use this to sort of reset the clock, essentially. But you're going to have to do some work to continue to treat them. But at least this way, they would be, not bobbing and weaving around. So let me get out of full screen mode. Let's see where we're going next with. So the ideas that I had for. Here, let's scroll down just a little bit. There we go. So the ideas that I had for potential future drugs, I just had a few of them. The first is antibiotics. And because I can totally see us getting a infection on a planet because you became injured. And so you don't just have the bleeding associated with the injury, but okay, sweet. I gave Hemazole and I stopped the bleeding and I restored the injury to health, but you still have an open wound and we don't have a med bay to heal you here. And over time you develop an infection. Okay, well, and until we can get you to a med bay and a med bed that can cure that infection based off whatever level it is, I can give you antibiotics out of my medical backpack, just like the other drugs, to stop the symptoms associated with that infection. We're going to talk more about that infection and shock here in a second. But that way you have something, and you can get an infection from all sorts of different things. You could be exposed to other people that are sick. You could get an infection from eating something wrong. So you're like, oh, I'm going to try out these berries or on this planet without scanning them or something. And you get an infection. There's a lot of different ways that you could get infection in the game. We'll leave that up to the game designers. But having antibiotics in order to treat that infection, just like you treat the other symptoms with the other drugs, I think would be a good way to, we've got evac coming, and there's an Apollo with a tier 2 med bay on it that will be here in 20 minutes or be here in 30 minutes, or we're going to finish this mission, finish this contract, and then we're going to head back to the station. We'll get you healed up. But I've got enough antibiotics to stave off this infection for an hour. And so that way you can continue to stay on mission. You can continue to be productive, if you're mining or whatever like that, or doing some exploration until you get back to a med bay and get healed. And it would also prevent that infection from... you could have a tier 3, tier 2, tier 1 infection. And so if you don't have antibiotics, you're after 15, 20 minutes or something like that, your tier 3 infection progresses to your tier 2 and the symptoms worsen, just like with injuries, with wounds. Blizzard says, or you could get an infection because you were taking a nap with your freshly bandaged wounds and someone opened the door of the Valk in a bacteria-heavy atmosphere. Exactly. This is why we need some sort of, whatever the glass stuff is, some sort of plexi to separate the crew area on the Valk from the rest of the ship and the exterior. But I could totally see you're exploring a planet, because there are going to be plenty of planets and areas on planets that are not well explored. And if you are walking around in just civilian attire, no suit, no helmet, and you haven't scanned the atmosphere, you might not. I could see where you scan the atmosphere and you're like, okay, there are harmful microbes on this planet, and so you don't want to take off your suit. Well, if you don't do your due diligence and you don't do the scan before going down, because the other thing is they could break it up based off of the biomes. And so you scan, you scan the planet and you see the different biomes and you click on a biome and then you scan that biome. And okay, this one doesn't have, nasty bugs in it that are going to hurt me. But if we transition into this area over here, because it's a swamp, or whatever, there could be things that are native to that area that are harmful to me. And okay, we're not going to land there, we're not going to explore there because we don't have the equipment, but we will explore over here. This having things like that makes exploration okay, you're doing the exploration, okay, now you found a resource, and you're going to let okay, there's something to be mined here, or resources to be gathered here, or something like that. Or we found a wreck that's crashed down here, and the crew's dead, but we want to salvage the ship. Okay, well, you're going to want to include that information when you send it back to somebody when you sell that location, unless you really hate them. Because you can say, hey, it's really important that you wear proper equipment and you have enough air supplies because of the nature of where where this is on the planet. And just in case, I would say bring a medic and make sure they bring some antibiotics. The same thing goes for antivenoms or antitoxins, and I call them toxins rather than like an anti-poison, just because antitoxin sounds better. But it does the same thing for as antibiotics, but for envenomations, where you got bit by something that was venomous, or stung by something that was venomous, like whether it's an insect or maybe something pokey on a plant, or poisonings. You touched a leaf on a plant, you should not have done that, or you touched a toxic substance and it poisons you. You inhaled something, or like a toxic gas. Or you ate something. Oh, look at these berries. These are really pretty. I bet they taste great. Maybe not. And having this would incentivize explorers or people who are going down and doing the planet to use scanning devices to scan the things that they find, to get information on them before they expose themselves to them, but also to make sure that, hey, we're going to go explore this planet. It doesn't have to be a new planet; it just has to be a planet that hasn't been fully explored. You're checking it out, but you want to plan ahead and have your scanning devices. But if somebody doesn't have the scanning device, or accidentally gets stung because they didn't see the thing in the bush, and it gets through their light armor, or maybe they're just wearing a spacesuit, you want to bring these things with you as part of your kit as a medic to say, okay, I can treat this person until we can get back to the Carrack, because we came down here on the Pisces. We didn't land the Carrack just because there's storms and high winds, or because landing the Carrack would use up a lot of our fuel and there isn't a gas giant here to get more fuel from. All these different scenarios where I'm going to come prepared. I'm going to treat the symptom and stave off the going from a tier 3 envenomation to a tier 2 with worsened effects, but we still need to cover this area, or we still need to finish scanning these things, and that way you can continue to stay on mission. I don't know what you would call it. I'm sure there's all sorts of cool names, but we know that there's going to be radiation in game, whether it's solar radiation from the star and Pyro, or you are an engineer on ship. And somehow your reactor gets overloaded and it starts putting off radiation. You're going to want to wear the appropriate equipment to protect yourself. But if you don't have that equipment, or the exposure overwhelms your equipment, or maybe you're on a planet or something like that has radiation, and you didn't do a good scanning, having medications that counteract radiation exposure in order, again, to prevent you from having to deal with those symptoms, but also preventing that illness from radiation exposure from getting worse due to lack of treatment. The other thing is, I was thinking that you could use demexatrin for this, or you could add a second type of adrenaline. In the human body, we have two types of I'm brain farting on the word. We have epinephrine and we have norepinephrine, two endogenous catecholamines that our bodies produce. And so you could add a second catecholamine, beyond just the demexatrin, or you could just use demexatrin for this. But that way, if you say you don't have your antibiotics, you don't have antivenom or antitoxin, you don't have something to treat your radiation exposure, well, when you progress from a tier 3 illness of those types, you could go into tier 2, and then you start going to low grade, and then for a tier 1 illness, high grade shock. Okay, well, that brings us to potential future symptoms. And this is something that I thought they could add, where if you're going into shock because you haven't stopped the bleeding, or because your blood pressure is getting so low from one of the things that I just talked about, you could treat that with a demexatrin or the other drug in order to stave off the effects of shock. But maybe have it be like a shorter acting thing. This is just I just need to take care of this long enough, but we know that the clock is ticking on the thing that is causing the shock. But I'm going to help stave off the shock with this. And this is one of those things where if you are the medic for this squad or this expedition, you can bring these things with you, these medications with you, but based off of your backpack, you might not be able to carry all of them, or you might be able to. Okay, I'm going to bring two vials of each because I think you should have to reload the your medical gun. And I can bring 2 vials of each. Okay, well, those 2 vials of each might only get you through treating a patient, depending on how severe their injury illness is, for a certain period of time. So part of your planning, along with the scanning that you do, is saying, okay, these are the threats that are known. And so I'm going to bring less of these things that I'm not expecting, or none of them, and more of the things that are more of a risk. This is a process that all expeditionary medics go through, whether you're in the military or you work for a private company, because there's lots of really big companies that do this in real life. This is a part of the planning that goes into these sorts of expeditions and missions. Is, okay, we know that this exists in this area. These things are the threats that I have to worry about. And so this is what I'm going to pack in my kit, because I can't pack, an entire hospital. And the same thing goes for your ship. You'll have limited supplies, and so yeah. So that's the first segment of medical gameplay. And so I talked about what we have in game, but I talked about how we could how CIG could expand upon that to bring illness into the fore, as well as by doing that, allowing for more symptoms, more medications, and then tying it into other aspects of the game to make the planning of what you're doing that much more impactful. And I think what CIG has done so far with the treatment of symptoms is great. My only gripe is the stupid beam. But other than that, everything they've done has been really, really well researched and really well thought out and planned. And the other thing that's interesting and smart is they're already setting our expectations, because it's easy to get when things are working appropriately. Big caveat: when things are working appropriately, it's very easy to get a low tier injury. It is rare to get a high tier injury. You have to continue to get hurt over and over again. And this is another one of those things that plays into what I think should be a thing is, if you continue to abuse your armor and your suit, and you already have an injury, well, you're going to make it worse. And that's a real life thing. It's a part of the decision making process on whether we evac somebody or not. What's the threat? Is there a risk of further injury? And or is it just a one-off thing and we can just keep going? Yeah, it's a thing. Yeah, Amchuka says fire medics are really good at planning for the best course of action. My brother is a Marine. He tells me the corpsmen are the same way. Yeah, it's people think that it's all about running to the down casualty and throwing a tourniquet on and putting pressure on a wound, and there's so much more to it, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It's just a matter of incorporating other aspects of the game that we already know are going to be part of the game or even in the game already, and just expanding upon them and tying them in together. We in the previous segment, the Spectrum Pulse, your FPS radar and scanning, as well as the scanning that you do from orbit with your ships, all that, ties into your planning. Or, doing research before you even leave, the landing zone or the space station or something like that. Okay, this is what we know, so this is what we're going to plan for. It's good gameplay. So let's scroll down. So the injuries, and they talk about it right here. Injuries are inflicted when a player receives sustained repeated damage. So injuries can be received on any limb, your chest, your head, and they're shown via your HUD. or via the scan using the Cure Life medical tool. And so this is the key part. Received when a player receives sustained repeated damage. And so that's why this ties into a lot of people thought that when medical gameplay was coming out and regeneration was becoming a thing, that Death of a Spaceman was going away. No, all this stuff is part of the plan for Death of a Spaceman. And it's part of the futuristic aspects of Star Citizen, where you're not just walking around in pants and a shirt, and you get shot, or or you're exposed to something and you don't have much protection. You easily can very easily get injured or severely hurt. No, you're part of your planning is not only the medic has to plan on what to bring based off of the threats to the crew, but also part of that planning is, okay, we need to make sure we're wearing the right protective equipment for the environment, for the threats, and that's why we have, there's not only armor for combat, but there's armor and suits for environments. We have industrial armor because accidents are going to happen when you're mining, when you're salvaging, all these sorts of things. And you need to be, you're not going to get, injured easily. You're not going to get severely injured easily. And it's going to be hard to die. We die a lot right now due to game bugs, but it's dying in the future is not meant to be a thing. If you go back and you read the Death of a Spaceman, it has always been the intent that dying will require something catastrophic happening to you, and usually, more often than not, a result of very poor decisions, i.e. running around in your medical gown in a combat zone. The idea has always been where you would be injured or get an illness and become downed long before you die. And it would take getting down multiple times with multiple treatments before you get really incapacitated. So it's meant to very much be realistic, because in reality, I was going to pull it up, but I forgot to. If you look at the statistics for the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, the overwhelming majority, like it's not even close, the overwhelming majority of injuries were non-severe, very minor, and treated, on site, or in the field. We had, thousands and tens of thousands of, if not hundreds of thousands of people get injured, but, the overwhelming majority, very high 90%, are very minor injuries. And then a lot of the moderate injuries, were healed in theater and people were returned to service. So that's something we're going to get into. Yeah, PPE checklist. Yep, safety circle. I like it. Yep, safety circle. Whatever shape you want to use. So we know what tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1 injuries are. These and the link to this page, which was released with Alpha 3.15, is going to be in the show notes. I'm just using it as a demonstration. But these are what cause the symptoms that you have in game right now, based off of where you're, whether the injury is to your leg, to your arm, to your torso, or to your head. And I think that in order to keep it simple and make sense and work with what we have, I think having the illnesses work the same way would be a good idea. Except for if you've got an infection, it starts here and then it goes to your full body, because that's how sepsis works. If you weren't wearing protective equipment, well, your whole body is going to be exposed to radiation poisoning, and it's just going to continue to get worse over time, that sort of thing. But if you got an envenomation, because or a localized toxic exposure to your arm or your leg, it would start there and then could spread to your body. And that's a way they could work that in. But there's multiple tiers of injuries. You need to in order to heal an injury, to actually cure it, not just suppress the symptom with medication. In order to actually heal it, for a tier 3 injury, you need a tier 3 bed. For a tier 2 injury, or a tier 3 bed or higher, so tier 2 or tier 1. For a tier 2 injury, you need a tier 2 bed or higher. And for a tier 1 injury, you can only heal those with a tier 1 bed. So one thing that's been mentioned, let's see, it's mentioned in each one of these blurbs, and it's not something that is really talked about, and I don't really know how it works in medical gameplay. I don't know if it's even a thing right now, is stabilization. And the other thing, it makes sense to me that any med bed could stabilize an injury to prevent it from getting worse over time. We give medications to suppress the symptoms, but you use the med bed to stabilize an injury to keep an untreated tier 1 injury or tier 2 injury from transitioning to a tier 1 injury. I think that's a good use of the med beds, but I think that needs to have some gameplay associated with it. We'll talk more about that. But right now, healing in the med beds is essentially completely automated. Like, you hop on there and you do a scan and it tells you what injuries you have, and you tell it to heal you, and then you're healed and you're done. Off you go. And it's gonna need to be a lot more than that. They've always said that, let's see. We're going to get down to that here in a little bit. So that is the 2 segments of medical gameplay in Star Citizen. So how can it, besides what I talked about earlier with the additional drugs, additional symptoms, things associated with shock, things that are medical in nature versus injury, how else can it improve? Where does CIG's healing, medical gameplay, actor status system go from here? So we already talked about the treatment of symptoms, and how by allowing for additional symptoms, things that are non-injury related, things that are illness related, from especially things that are localized to given areas and can be mitigated and found out about by scanning and using, use the damn Galactopedia, lore equals gameplay. It's, if somebody discovers a poisonous thing on a planet and says it's in this area, that's now canon within the game. That is lore, and that lore is now gameplay. But explorers, they need to have more risk than just falling off a cliff or getting Wookiee slapped by a boreal stalker. And this, like I said, this applies to everybody. If you are, whether you're out in space or you're on a planet or a moon or something like that, there's the potential for injury and illness. You can be EVAing around a derelict while doing salvage, and there could be a solar flare or something, or somebody could screw up while salvaging the wreck or cutting the wreck, and it could cause a release of radiation, that hurts you, or you could do it to yourself, and you're not wearing, the right personal protective equipment. And this is, a thing that, adds a lot of depth to not only the gameplay for medical and healing, but also for the other features that, that are being, played or performed by players, that a medic is supporting. And it gives a lot more risk versus reward and planning for the player, and that makes things a lot more engaging, and it makes it for a much more rewarding experience. You get a lot more sense of accomplishment, especially if you're able to prevent something, or you planned appropriately and the thing happens and you're like, see, I told you, you always listen to the medic. Yeah, Blizzard says, I'm probably going to need a tetanus shot every time I go to the ruined station. Yes, before, while we're en route, everybody, it'll come over the PA system in your character or your galaxy. Now hear this. All crew not, on command stations, please proceed to the med bay for, pre-deployment vaccinations, because that's a thing. Man, did I get so many vaccinations before I went to Iraq and Afghanistan. A whole lot. So many shots. And the other thing that I think can be improved upon is we need additional variation, not just a variation, but additional additional things implemented, and this is, I think, will play into the HUD, the player interaction system, those reworks that we talked about in the Spectrum Pulse, because we can add a lot, they can very simply add new UI that gives you more information about the symptoms of an injury or an illness, that will, as well as giving more feedback to the patient, because right now the patient just has what they experience, but there isn't anything on their HUD, there isn't anything telling them that they've got this long until the medication wears off. And I think in the 30th century, okay, you're a medic, you're injured, you have these symptoms, or you're ill, and for whatever reason, and your medic scans you, says, okay, you've got this, and this going on. I'm going to give you this much of these 2 or 3 medications, I'm going to need to redose you in 15, 20, 30 minutes or whatever, as those things wear off. Well, I think that the patient should have more information about their symptoms, and I think that this could be beneficial, so that way they know ahead of time, like, okay, the medic just gave me some medicine, I can go off and do what I'm doing, and a reminder that, okay, I should start heading back, because the timer's counting down, and I know it's going to take me 5 minutes, 10 minutes to get back out of this cave, in order to get back to where the medic is, and I don't want to be limping during that time and have it take even longer and have my injury progress from a tier 3 to a tier 2. To allow the patient to feel more engaged and part of the treatment process, because that's a thing in real life too, patient education. And I also think that it's something that could be incorporated into the med bed for stabilization of an injury, in order to make it so that way, if you can't heal an injury, you can stabilize the injury and give the patient feedback while they're being healed, while they're being stabilized, in order to be a part of the process and not just, be looking up at everything. The other thing is with stabilization, I think that, stabilization can also play into the treatment of symptoms. I think that's part of the plan, but I don't think it's incorporated yet, because what happens in real life is if I drop some medication in a syringe and I just give it IV push like that, generally it doesn't last as long, but I'm able to give it quickly, which makes it really good for field work. If you're a combat medic or you're a paramedic on the streets. But if I give you someone an infusion, if I give you, you hop in the med bed, you say, okay, you're injured nearby, we got you in the med bed pretty quickly. Instead of treating you with the med gun, we're going to use the med bed to stabilize you. And I can't heal this tier 2 injury with my tier 3 bed, but what I can do is I can give you an infusion over 1 to 2 minutes of the same drugs that I was going to give you a injection of, and that will allow for a much longer therapeutic window. Instead of it lasting 5-10 minutes, maybe it'll last you 15-20 minutes before you have to be redosed, while also making it so, okay, I'm going to give you I'm going to treat you, and this treatment's going to last longer and allow you to be more productive, allow you to stay in the fight longer. It's just going to take maybe 1-2 minutes longer to do it because it's an infusion. But also, doing that allows you to get that added benefit without going over the blood drug level, without overdosing. And so somebody can stay in the fight longer. And so that gives a lot more value to things like the C8R or the Cuddy Red, because they can't heal higher injuries. But if they can stabilize your injury that you already have and prevent it from getting worse, while also providing a what we call a longer mechanism of action for treating your symptoms, that adds a lot more value in order to keep players playing before they eventually have to return, and find a high enough tier med bed to get healed. And so I think that would add a lot to the gameplay and add a lot more value to those ships that people don't see a lot of value in already. So now we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. Get rid of the stupid beam. Before we talk about that, let's see, is it this one?
As a follow.
Yeah. So we're going to listen to them talk about why it's a beam real quick.
From the chat, there's a lot of the things that are done in the first person, like medical stuff like that, are beams. It's switch an attachment, switch an item, shoot a beam at a thing. Shoot a beam, it heals a thing. Shoot a beam, it salvages a thing. Shoot a beam, it repairs a thing. Why is that? Let's talk a little bit about why in a game of this size and scope are these things, beams, and like, why aren't we making like Operation? is you get what I'm saying? Get where I'm going with this? It's like, why beams, basically?
Well, kind of for a start, a lot of the systems that we have in game at the moment are the very, very first implementation of them. So,
very, very first implementation. So, they remember how we talked about how before they reprioritized those teams to Squadron 42, we would get features that were incomplete. And there were, a lot of things were getting built out in order to get incorporated into Squadron 42 after being, built for the PU. But they also had timelines that they were beholden to. And so we've got animations for you using the med pens and injecting someone else, injecting yourself. If you use either of the med guns on yourself, it puts it against your arm, and essentially, you're almost injecting yourself. So pretty much the only time is when you're healing someone else with a gun that they use a beam. To me, this is the very first implementation, and so in order to be able to test the under the hood aspects of the gameplay, making sure that this tool actually does this thing for the actor status, they needed to get in a simplified version of it in order to test it, in order for us to use it and get feedback for them, as well as to get some of that into Squadron 42 to continue to iterate on that. And so I think that a tractor beam absolutely makes sense. That is quintessential sci-fi. I think a salvage beam makes sense because you are using a laser to degrade the structural integrity of something and then using a tractor beam to suck it up. A mining beam, the same thing. You are degrading the what would you call it? Whatever holds rocks together. The rock's cohesion. You're degrading the rock's cohesion by shooting it with a laser. Okay, that's totally believable in sci-fi. And then it breaks up and you suck it up with a tractor beam. Totally makes sense. The beam in Star Citizen makes zero sense. And I'll tell you why. There is nothing in the lore that says that we use beams to magically move medicine from inside this device through the air, then through armor, which is meant to stop bullets and lasers, and then through a spacesuit, which is meant to stop the environment of space and keep you inside and the space outside, and then through your skin, which has been gone through thousands of years of evolution to keep things from going through it and getting into your body. It makes zero sense, even in the 30th century. And so that's why I hate beams, because it's also not a sci-fi trope. I've never in my life, in a book or a game or a movie or something like that, heard of someone using healing beams. Now, there are lasers for performing surgery. We've got Bacta tanks. All sorts of stuff. Even nanobots that are injected, not beamed across space. So it's medical salvaging tool that we can set to reverse. So the term is harvesting. And I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a thing. Because that's an actual job, and it's actually a job that a lot of medics and EMTs get into after they want to get out of working in the field because it's rough. Going into organ and tissue harvesting pays a boatload of money, but you have to be on call a lot. That's why I didn't never get into it. Anyway, medical salvaging, it's a thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it became a thing in game. I would like it to be the illicit side of medical gameplay. I'm okay with this. I don't know if there's anything R-rated about that would prevent them from putting it in the game, but I think it would be cool because waste not, want not. There's a freshly dead body or something like that. Don't want those organs going to waste. Just saying. Waste not, want not. So the beam doesn't make sense. The other thing that the beam really... let's finish listening to this quote, because I get where Jared is coming from in what he's going to say, and I totally understand that, and it makes sense because I don't like it in other games, but I don't think we need the beam to address that. I'm going to talk about why.
When you think about it, it was very convenient for us to put that on something like the multi-tool, which is a very good base for swapping in and out attachments, changing the functionality of it, and kind of getting the very first level of each of these mechanics in there. So when I talk about salvage, for example, the multi-tool, the iteration that we're putting in now, which is the very simplest form of salvage, is always what the multi-tool is going to do. It's not going to do anything more than that, but everything extrapolated out from that will be more. Like, for example, being able to take weapons off ships, for example, cutting bits off and putting them in your reclaimer, going selling ship parts and stuff like that. That will all come down the line. So I think there's obviously, if people are saying that everything feels a bit beamy at the moment, it's because it's a lot simpler. It's a much simpler interaction than what it's going to be down the line, when there's going to be a lot more considerations to kind of like take into account. And if you think about even like the medical gun versus the multi-tool, it feels like if you have the medical attachment for the multi-tool, it's very easy to run up to someone and go like, hey, I'm going to heal you, I'm interacting with you, I'm firing the beam at you, cool. That's basically what we wanted it to be. It's a very simple way of keeping someone alive, which is what we wanted it to be in the universe. It's like an emergency tool that you're using to stabilize someone. But when you look at the medical gun, you don't just run up to them and fire the beam, or you can do if you want to, because the functionality is on there, but an advanced user or a medical practitioner will be going over to the advanced side, moving all the sliders around, checking all the symptoms, all the issues that they've got with them, and making some informed decisions based off that. Now, in terms of like why beams, obviously if we wanted to make this a bit more visceral and up close, we're going to end up taking a lot of control away from the player. So if it was, say, for example, Jared, you were down on the floor and you were wiggling around on the floor, and I was trying to get hold of you, we would both have to be locked into place for that entire process, which both might make both of us like vulnerable, for example. Taking control away from the player is obviously sometimes appropriate, but doing it all the time for a lot of these different mechanics makes things a lot more difficult. So obviously it's a bit nicer to keep player control in, keep people at range, and just kind of have like almost beam or range devices that let us do some of these kind of perform some of these systems.
The control thing is where I was hoping you were going to go with that. It's in a multiplayer game, losing control of your character is probably one of the least favorite things that can happen. But in a massively multiplayer game, where when people can start prompts with you, it's like, oh look, I'm going to try to heal you, or I'm going to try, and it just stops you, and it's in order for the animations to match up, like this person's going to grab you and they're going to rip open your thing or whatever, and now your character is just stuck while somebody else is essentially playing and in control of your person, is a very uncomfortable and not very enjoyable experience. So the beams allow that kind of flexibility.
Okay, so nope, we're not ready for this. Get that here in just a second. Let's see. So I totally get what Jared was saying about locking in your character with these animations, because like I tried to find a good one, but we're gonna look at a couple clips really quick. There's a lot of games where, especially if you're wounded and you're healing, you're playing as the medic, and you're doing a thing and it's an animation, and you're usually only doing it for, the CIG wants this level of immersion, and you're you're a lot of times these animations, either the person doing the animation is disconnected from the other person, like in Squad, or like in battle, but the person has to stay there. They can't move out, otherwise it resets it, or it can lock the person in. And I think the way that we solve this is, instead of you are giving if you're using the beam, it's because you're giving a rapid dose of something. You're not giving an infusion, and you don't need the animation to be long. You just need to get up next to the person and then quickly administer it. You go, just like you do on your own arm. It's not even a second long. I think it's wholly unnecessary to be able to beam people from range, and it doesn't add anything to the game. It takes away a lot from that combat medic gameplay that makes the experience rewarding and interesting and fun. You don't need to do the whole bandaging for 4 seconds or something like that, or I'm going to come up next to you and do whatever. It doesn't need to lock you in for a long period of time. I totally get that, and it can be jarring, but at the same time, I think it's more important for, okay, you are injured, you are requesting healing, or treatment. Hold still for an effing second. You shouldn't be doing something while you are getting treated. That is like the absolute basics tenet of being a combat medic, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. So, let's look at these. Yeah, it significantly reduces the risk reward opportunity and tactical decision making available for the medic and the team in the hostile environment. Treating from a distance, it reduces the need for utilizing cover, for moving the patient to cover, for calling for coordinating fire, or other means of suppression while you extract the victim. Like I said, these are the basic tenets of being a combat medic, and it's what makes being combat medic gameplay so exciting. It's why people like playing it. And if I totally get it if you're doing 20th century bandaging, 20th century putting on a tourniquet, but we are giving medicine, and you should be able to just like if you watch somebody get a hypo spray in Star Trek, it takes that long. You're not in the animation while you're dialing in the dose. You can scan them while they're moving around doing their thing. You don't have to stop them to scan them, but you scan them. You're like, okay, I'm going to dial in this dose, and they hold still for a split second, and then you do the animation, and automatically you just grab their arm, and you're done. That's it. It's not intrusive. That's not a bad thing, but it makes it so that way, okay, I know I have to be next to this patient to heal them. If it's in a combat environment, I need to weigh that decision of, okay, in order to give them a dose of hemazole, in order to treat these symptoms, if we need to get them to cover, we need to establish covering fire. Maybe I need to deploy a shield or throw smoke. Do I, run to them and then drag them back to cover if they're not in cover? And there's other ways that we can incorporate this by further expanding on it. But, I love being the medic in Squad. I love being the medic in Arma. I think Arma is too over the top. I think Squad is the right level of simplicity. But we don't need these long multi-second animations that drive everybody nuts in Battlefield or Call of Duty for rezzing someone. We don't need any of that. We just need a quick animation to give a dose of a medicine. And if I can give, in real life, if I can give a syringe of something in less than a minute in a game, we can give it in, a split second where, it's, you've dialed in the dose and it's, the med gun thing, pressurizes it into a port that's standardized on every armor and every spacesuit. And that's why I think that they're going with what they had from an initial implementation, because they want to do something more interesting and diegetic later on, but they just didn't have the time right now, kind of like with so many features of Star Citizen. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement that is not complicated and is not negatively impactful. So let's look at a couple of examples real quick that I found on the internet. And this is in Squad. And we're only going to watch this for a few seconds before we go to the next one.
Was shooting us.
Thank you.
Dab is one here, I think. Yeah, one guy up here. Thank you.
Freddy, there's one more left on the ticker where I died. They're like in the road. Just my...
Dead here. Copy.
But they're giving up, which is good news. Thank you.
So I picked this clip because it does a really good job of showcasing if you are able to heal at range, it takes away a lot of the risk and tactical decision making that a medic would have to, would normally have to do. It makes the medic gameplay far less engaging because that first guy, yes, SC will have hospital gameplay, but that's for we're not really going to get into that too much. We're really talking more about like we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. But for right now, so that first guy that was behind the truck, okay, he started taking fire. He ran for cover, and then he had to bound from the cover that he was in to get close to the victim, to the patient, in order to treat him. And it wasn't, okay, I'll just stay back here behind cover from 15 feet away or whatever, and I'll heal him from here. That's not engaging gameplay. That's a significant reduction in the risk to the medic. It's significant reduction in the emergent gameplay and the decision making. It's just not as rewarding. You can think about a scenario where, okay, there's our wounded out there, and I can't get to him because we're taking fire. But okay, sweet, we're going to establish fire support and throw out a smoke grenade, and Star Citizen you could deploy a shield or something like that. I think would be good because we're going to have those, or throw a smoke, run out there, drag him back to cover, all that sort of stuff. That is quintessential combat meta gameplay, and healing at range really neuters a lot of that. I know it's not long range, but it's long enough where it really fucks it up for me. And I know it messes it up for a lot of people. It makes it super gamey and more World of Warcraft and less Space Sim. So let's watch this one. This is Arma. And I apologize for the...
Immediately. Oh fuck, need fire out northwest. Look at the blue door.
In the building.
I'm on it.
Oh, fuck me, dude. Of course the decent just lets him like somehow magically pop in front of me. Cause like I fired when he wasn't in my scope. Like yeah, like I fired when you weren't in my scope, but then I just see you like pop into it after the shot went off, and then you died.
Sepsi Dagon, get to the front door. Let's cross.
Arrow giving you saline.
So the treatment in the Arma, in this mod for Arma, with the combat medic, the treatment is way too sweaty try hard for me. It was way too complex. We don't need to do any of that. And that's why I like with the 30th century system where everybody's armor and suits has, an injection port, in each arm or something like that, where, okay, he's, injured, I do a quick, or downed or whatever. I'm just going to give hemazole. Done. Split second animation, they're back up. But, or, okay, I've scanned them, while they're, returning fire or whatever, and I can see that they have these injuries, so I know what symptoms they are, and so I know I need to treat with these drugs. I'm going to give them, a 5-minute dose of this and this, and then done. They're treated. None of this long, like what they just did with moving through all these windows and applying multiple different treatments and all that. That is way too sweaty, try hard sim. Not necessary. We just need to be able to quickly inject treatments, hypospray like into your armor, your suit, that would be ready to go with this. There are already systems in place that are being designed where a machine will place an IV in you. And so to me, it's totally reasonable that, you put on your spacesuit and your armor, and then, you put on your arms, and then it does a little thing that's underneath this part of the gauntlet or whatever and injects a catheter into you. And that way you can just inject right into this little circle thing and it'll go straight into your bloodstream. And the medical tool, does it injects it in a pressurized manner, so that you're not sitting there going slowly infusing. It's just a hypospray. You're done, and it's a simple animation. Nobody's locked in for a long period of time, but the gameplay needs to be immersive enough where, okay, you want to get treated, you need to hold still for a split second while I inject you. You can wait that long, or otherwise you're not going to get treatment. But we don't need to be doing all this. But at the beginning of this clip was really good because it showed that, okay, there's someone wounded there. The medic takes fire, he drops down to cover, coordinates with his squad. The squad pulls the victim into cover, and then the medic makes a break for it while they're getting suppressive fire to get into the building and treat the patient now that you're in cover. He didn't back around the corner of the building and lean around with his medical laser and, res the patient, heal the patient from 15, 20 feet away. Do you see what I'm getting at? Do you see where the gameplay is far more engaging, far more rewarding by not having ranged healing and just allowing for a very short administration of medicine, in an animation? The best part about it is they are building an animation system in your ships, so that way, regardless of where the button is on a ship, regardless of how the ship is set up, whether it's an origin ship or a Drake ship, and the buttons are in two different places. If you press the keybind, it will move your arm to press that button wherever it's supposed to be. And it doesn't create a bespoke animation. It's just a diegetic system that's holistic in that, it knows that the button's here and I know I have to move this way to push it, or move this way to push it, or over here to push it, regardless of what kind of ship I'm in. You can do this. You can take that same technology and apply it to somebody who is in a prone position, someone who's in a kneeling position, in a standing position, regardless of where that arm is, with your injection port on the inside of it, just like how we already have the animation to inject yourself, to treat your own self like that. Same thing, regardless of what position the patient is in, it will create an animation to, reach out, grab that arm, done. That's not even a second long. Not even a second, compared to this sweaty tryhard nonsense. And so by doing it that way, it offers a whole lot more to the gameplay without taking anything away from it. And then I just wanted to show this clip because I love Foxhole. I think it's a really fun top-down game. But the medicine isn't super complex, but the coordination amongst your squad and the emphasis on using smoke and covering fire in order to go get the wounded and bring them back and then treat them in cover is really great. And that's why I like it. So we'll watch a quick clip.
Cover fire, please. Oh, shit. Oh no!
So it wasn't a happy ending, but it really highlighted a point that's really important, where if you can do ranged healing, you aren't incentivized to use the body dragging system or the carry system that they're building in order to move a patient to cover to treat them in somewhere where it's safe. You're just going to stand behind whatever cover's nearby, as long as it's close enough, and then heal them. Versus, I need to get you back to someplace safe before I can treat you. You're going to be okay. You're not dead yet. They know that their down timer is an hour or something like that, or whatever. And you do it in a way that makes sense, and you don't. That's why I hate healing beams, because it doesn't make sense. So this is here. We'll pull up this part. And so to that end, and I've been talking about it. This is why I really think that our not only should all suits and armor, just like they made regeneration a almost not regen. They made imprinting a universal thing. Imprinting is everywhere. Regeneration is not. But I think that part of that should be all armor and all suits. Should have it should be an industry standard that says everything has an injection port. You put on your suit and your industrial armor to go to work, and it has an injection port in case you become injured or ill. Same thing for combat, armor and suits. It has an injection port, and it's standard practice. Everybody has it. But I also think that, and this is something that I agree with Paul a lot, and the CIG has talked about it directly, your character with your armor and your suits are going to be much more like spaceships in that, there are going to be ways they can be customized for function, and have consumption of resources, all that sort of stuff, in order to really make everything very diegetic, very immersive. And I think that there should be modules, medical modules, that you can install on a module slot on your armor that does a auto inject of hemazole if it detects that you have gone into shock and you've been downed. I think that you might be able to have a module that you can put on your arms and your arm and leg armors, so that way if you sustain a tier 1 injury, or maybe even a tier 2, but at least a tier 1, where it it applies a tourniquet. It won't show you anything on the player, but if you get scanned, the medic will know, okay, that there's a tier 1 injury, the bleeding has already been stopped. I don't have to apply hemazole to that limb because the bleeding has been stopped. And that would prevent your by doing that, it would make it so that way your downed timer stops ticking. And you're downed, but you're not getting back up until somebody somebody treats you and revives you. But at least you're not going to die in a hurry. And so what I'm talking about is what allows for what we call in the military, and this is part of the tactical combat casualty care, and this is just the absolute basics of being a combat medic. If somebody is injured, you're in a combat scenario. If somebody is injured and they go down, you as the medic and your squad, everybody returns fire and you take cover. You do not rush. This is something that most gamers absolutely screw up because they see, there's somebody I can heal, and if I heal them, I get points. But they run up to the casualty and then they get shot and then they're dead. And they don't get anywhere. You never attempt to rescue a casualty until hostile fire has been suppressed. So you start putting covering fire in order to keep the enemy's heads down and to at least reduce the amount of return fire that you're receiving. And then your buddy who is out on point took a round to the leg and they're downed and they're out in the middle, but there's a couple of crates to the right of them, or a vehicle or something like that. You talk to them, if they're downed. That's the other thing with the auto injection of the hemazole. Okay, you're not downed, you're not just laying there, you have that auto injection of your hemazole, you're still have a severe injury or something, and you can't walk or whatever. Or, the auto injector allows you to be conscious and then crawl to cover or move to cover, based off of how severe your injury is. And then if they have, their own first aid stuff, they can treat themselves. You don't have to go running up to them to treat them. You don't have to expose yourself. But, this is part of being a combat medic. And these are the types of things, the scenarios that are engaging and rewarding and challenging and require teamwork and coordination that having ranged healing removes. So you tell them to move to cover if they, that's why I think that the auto ejector of Hemazol would be a great module. They can apply self-aid once they've been auto revived, and move to cover, as well as the suit thing could automatically tourniquet off a tier 1 injury, and prevent the stop the clock on or a tier 2 injury. It could stop the clock on that tier 2 injury to prevent you from progressing to a tier 1 injury over time. These are a lot of different things that could you could incorporate very easily, because they're mostly things that are in the under the hood part of the medical system versus things that you have to actually render and make animations for. It's simple UI, and that's button pushes that enact code underneath the hood of the game. So let's we'll talk about the healing aspect, because we've been talking a lot about treating symptoms, and we're getting near the end, and but you guys will see what I'm talking about. So we're going to pull up a quote that I love to show people who think that medical gameplay is right where it needs to be and it's simplistic, and that's a good thing. So for the MISC Endeavor Q&A, this is the Q&A part 3. And again, all these links and everything will be in the show notes if you're watching this on YouTube. So for part 3, Tony Zurovec answered the questions on the Q&A. And the question is, with the Hope class ship, do you see medical as being a complete profession? Let's make this big. The medical profession is one of the more important occupations within Star Citizen, and it's intended to be one of the larger and more flexible roles. On the FPS combat front, medics will be invaluable. They'll be able to perform field triage that can heal some injuries entirely. Probably not going to be a thing, but and mitigate others enough so that the injured party is at least more functional. That's what I've been talking about. With you being a medic, whether you're an industry medic or a combat medic, being able to, as we say in Army medicine, sustain the fighting force or maintain the fighting force. So that the injured party is at least more functional. You can continue to treat people that you don't have to hurry back to a med bay. You're just having to treat the symptoms, and keep them alive so that they can continue to work regardless of what that work is, until, at a later point when it's more convenient, you can rendezvous with the med bay. The effects of more serious injuries can often be slowed so that there is a better chance of reaching a hospital where more advanced medical apparatus can improve the chances of survival. This is that stabilization aspect that we're talking about. This Q&A was like in 2013 or 2014, and he's directly talking about concepts that were talked about in the lead up, as part of in the documentation for 3.15, however many years later that was, like 8 or something. So it didn't go away. The design, really hasn't changed. It's just been refined. Depending on the cause of death, a well-trained medic can occasionally restart a patient's heart, although death may soon reoccur if the root causes are not quickly addressed. So this is, you're giving the Hemazol to, restore perfusion and get them back up, but you still have to stop the bleeding. You still need to stabilize those injuries, otherwise, that timer can click on down again. Northern Trooper says, with space medical play, we also have to worry about radiation poisoning and other effects we would have to treat on, or will that be limited? No, I totally think radiation poisoning will totally be a thing. Absolutely. It's been talked about in the lore where people have been exposed to radiation. We know that the Pyro Star is still going to be dangerous. You need to have appropriate shielding for your ship. That I don't think that's going away at all. I think it's going to be a risk, something that you're going to have to plan for. But I don't think it's going to be strictly environmental. I think that radiation can come, from a damaged reactor on your ship, and other things. The RSI Apollo So, this is from the Q&A from the RSI Apollo. Will there be any interactive gameplay? This is in 2018. So like 4 or 5 years after that previous Q&A question. Will there be any interactive doctor gameplay to healing in medbays and first aid? Or will it be automatic based on the tier of healing? The design for doctor medical gameplay is not fully signed off, but it currently has interactive elements to it. One of the things that we always want to do with Star Citizen is to make player interactions physical rather than just pressing a button and walking away. An example being the current mining loop that requires a level of constant control instead of automatic extraction. We're going to come back to mining because that's very important when we talk about healing and what I have, as far as suggestions for it. Yeah, Zalea, you're spot on in the chat. So, like in the RSI Apollo Q&A, mining is a really good example of what good UI can do to gamify something that in reality is very complex. In mining, you apply power to your laser in order, and other modifiers like from devices and stuff, to destabilize a rock within a certain window without, in order to break it successfully. But you have to get it into the green and keep it into the pardon me, and keep it in the green for a certain period of time in order to be successful. That's the goal. And medical gameplay should really be much the same way for healing. Not really so much for treating symptoms, but for healing. And so let's take a look at a couple screenshots because I'm gonna tie all this together. So here is a hospital room on Orison, and you can see here's the med bay over here in the bottom right. Here, let's make it big. Medical bed here on the bottom right, and next to it is an IV station where you can plug in medications and hang bags for infusions, just like we do in real life. And guess what? You can interact with these and pick them up right now. This is so real for me, and we're going to tie all this together here in just a second. It's going to make a lot of sense. Same thing. Oh, wait, was this one? Oh, this is New Babbage, sorry. And this one was in Orison, I guess. But again, you have your IV station over here, your scanning device thing over here. Potentially, I think that this is a tier 1 bed because it has this big old, potentially could be a tier 1 bed because it has this big old scanning circle thing for, probably you go in there for regeneration, as well as healing via regeneration, like growing new limbs and organs. Whereas this one's a tier 2 bed because it doesn't have that, I don't think. We'll just have to see. But a lot of implements that are able to be interacted with. And here's the scanning, and you see your health bar here. You've been scanned. You know that there's an injury here. The level of the injury, what the recommended treatment is. Or if you're doing stabilization because you can't heal, what the recommended drug is. In order to combat what symptoms. This is good UI. This is a good start. And they can add a few more things onto this to make it a bit more informative. But this is exactly what I do in real life. Just like with mining, I am applying with medicine. I'm applying different medications, and infusions in order to get something into the green and keep it in the green over a period of time. And oftentimes, and this is what I want for healing, where sometimes those things that you are giving in order to get to provide healing and get them into the green, they may be competing, and so you have to balance those things and do what we call titration. And this is my job. This is my reality. But obviously, this is really busy. There's way too much information on here. We don't need all this. We need simple, like this, but maybe with a bar, that a progress bar of time to being healed for, an injury that's, you're currently, for each one that you're currently treating, and, you have a symptom meter or something like that you have to keep in the green with the various, things that you're infusing, whether it's medication or, regen serum or whatever, in order to keep it in the green while they're being healed. Again, this is real life. You're titrating these things in order to keep these wavy lines and the numbers associated with them happy. But for medical gameplay, we can just make it so that way, there's a progress bar towards healing, and, this is the rate of healing that's occurring based off of how much you're infusing. But you also have to titrate and balance those different things that you're giving in order to not, go just like with mining. In order to, while the progress bar, let's see. So while your progress bar of healing is going up towards completion, you are keeping them in the green in order to not give them untoward effects from too much medication. But you also need to keep them in the green and not, you want to make sure that they're not, that they're getting enough medication, to be in the green, to have those goals. And what they can do is by keeping someone in the, the patient will get healed over a period of time. How well you keep them in the green can accelerate how fast the healing occurs, but also, if you keep them in the green, it affects your payout from insurance. And so, the player already has insurance. They don't have to pay you out of pocket or anything like that. But, the rating they give you, the rating the system gives you will be dependent on how quickly you got them healed, as well as how much in the green they were. Were they over in the red? Were they below in the yellow? Did you keep them in the green? And that's what will, give you a payment modifier as well as a reputation modifier based off of the organizations that are medical in nature in game, because reputation is the other currency in game besides just monies. But I think that that'd be a really great way to gamify healing, not just treatment of symptoms. Using good UI, you don't have to do anything with the character, have things show up on the character or anything like that. You just have good UI to represent it, and you do, gameplay that is very. If a player has mind, they're familiar with what they need to do. It becomes very, you can very quickly become familiar and acclimatized with it and how it works in a very short period. But it also allows for scale. So based off of how many injuries the player has, you can have multiple injuries, and illnesses and multiple symptoms and stuff. And so the more injured a player is, the more challenging, just like a more challenging rock, the more challenging it is to keep them in the green while you're doing the healing. The healing takes longer because they have more injuries and illness. And that healing, that green, that optimum window is smaller, just like a more challenging rock. But because they have more injuries, and because they have more illnesses and stuff, and it's more challenging, the payout and the reward, in UEC and reputation is that much greater. So you want to be able to take on those missions. You want to have the reputation with those organizations that says, hey, there's someone with a tier 1 injury, or one tier 1 and 2 tier 2 injuries. You have the reputation, you go treat them, because that makes it rewarding. And it also it encourages you to use the healing system versus just using the automated system. Because you could have you should have a mode where, if you've got a tier 2 bed on your Carrack and you're an explorer, okay, well, maybe you don't have your medic with you who knows the bed, but you still need to be able to heal people. And you just do the automated healing, and their convalescence period after healing is longer because you did the automated. Or if you're just trying to do more missions, trying to make it up in volume, you could do more healing on your tier 2 beds on your on your Apollo, or maybe you have multiple patients and you can't babysit all of them, but you need to get them healed up. That could be, a viable thing, and by doing 4 patients, with less attention instead of, versus 1 with more attention, you make the same amount of money or make a little bit more money and a little bit more reputation versus the more interactive system. But, being able to get those missions via reputation and via actually performing the challenging skill on patients of increasing challenge and difficulty is, the way you build that system and allow for skill progression and higher rewards in game. And we're almost done. This is the last little bit, and I just want to remind everyone, when everybody's like, oh, we don't need all this, I'm just going to backspace, I'll just regen. Regeneration is expensive, and CIG has told us this multiple times. In the first Lore Maker's Guide, they told us, today, while the regeneration process remains costly, even the lowliest space station is equipped with an imprint-capable medical scanner. So even the lowliest space station is equipped with a medical scanner for updating your imprint. It does not say that it is equipped with a medical bed that is capable of regeneration. This is why Tier 2 beds aren't going to be regen capable, people. It was in the roadmap when they first showed that stuff up, where it wasn't going to be. They only changed it just because of the state of the game. I absolutely promise you're going to be disappointed if you think that Tier 2 beds are going to be regen capable. Just like they can't do Tier 1 injuries. It is heal Tier 1 injuries. It has always been that way in the development of the game. And I've got all the citations regarding the Endeavor and the Apollo that show that, spawning, essentially respawn, is not going to be a part of Tier 2 beds. And it's not necessary, because that's not how things work in real life. You don't need a regen bed everywhere. You just need them sprinkled around here and there, so that way people can, if they die, they can come back and go on about their day without too much inconvenience. But in the Lore Makers community questions from last month, a question was asked about the effects of regeneration on society. Again, all these links are going to be in the show notes. Let's see. Third, the broader cultural impact. It's understandable that we want to try and explain the risk-embracing behavior of players as an indication of the broader cultural impact of regeneration. But people don't drive more recklessly because they have seatbelts. A lot of the repercussions and limitations of regeneration aren't represented in the current iteration of the game. So while some individuals might be more reckless, it's likely they were predisposed for that behavior regardless of the wide availability of regeneration. For companies and organizations like the UEE, the giant, overarching, all-powerful, massive government of human civilization, regeneration is still a costly process. For organizations and companies like the UEE, so little old you, who is not an oligarch in Star Citizen, regeneration is not going to be cheap, and there's going to be consequences to it. We have already talked about how there is going to be convalescence periods and symptoms that you have to deal with that will, you probably require treatment to take care of, or it's just going to be based off of a timer. For companies and organizations like the UE, regeneration is still a costly process, and it's almost always either cheaper, easier, or simply more moral to focus on saving lives, treating symptoms, and good medical gameplay and healing, than it is to rely on this imperfect technology. Imperfect. So, that's one little reminder. The medical and healing and actor status system in its current and future iterations is designed to integrate with the idea that the entire design of Star Citizen is to encourage you to preserve your character, calculate risks, and plan and work together with others to achieve your goals. Planning is the ultimate gameplay of Star Citizen. risk versus reward is the most engaging part of the game. Making those decisions based off of the information and resources you have available. That's what makes for engaging gameplay. As long as you're not running around in your medical gown, you won't die easily. Unless you are just exceedingly risky. Everything about the way the game's being designed is so that you don't die easily. Ships aren't meant to just blow up. Your armor and your suit are supposed to protect you from the environment. You're going to have to take repeated damage while wearing armor and a suit in order to even gain an injury, let alone die. So you won't die easily. You won't be severely injured easily. You won't be forced to go get healed immediately. That's the whole point of having the ability to treat symptoms. So you can have an injury, but mask the symptoms of that injury until it's more convenient or until for you to get healed. And that's part of the planning process. Okay, I've got enough medicine to treat these symptoms for 45 minutes or an hour of gameplay. So let's finish mining these rocks. Let's finish, salvaging this ship. And then we'll head back to the station. Or while we're finishing salvaging, we're in Stanton. Or we're in a system that isn't, 100 AU. Let's call for medical support. And by the time we get done, after I've treated you, we can rendezvous with a medical ship and they can treat you. So you're not going to get forced to go get healed immediately in order to continue to play the game. As long as you plan ahead, you bring a medic with you, you bring some medicine with you in order to treat symptoms. If you go out unprepared, you're going to have a bad time, and the symptoms are going to impact your gameplay. And hopefully you'll learn your lesson. And you're going to be encouraged to use these systems, use the systems and the way they're built to survive in the game. It's a good design. I like it. There's only a few little quips I have with the way it works right now, and I don't think that's a permanent thing. And I'm hoping that CIG, maybe they see this, maybe they, other people have had the same ideas, and that later when it's more of a priority, they can, implement some of these things, particularly getting rid of the stupid healing beam, in order to take this gameplay to that next level, to make it on par with the other aspects of the game, with how immersive and engaging it is. So that is it for this scanner anomaly. I know that this has been probably the longest podcast that we've done. We're almost at 4 hours between a spectrum pulse and a scanner anomaly. But there's been a lot of discussion on what we talked about in the... Actually, here, let's go back to this. Yeah, so there's been a lot of discussion in the community about what's going on with Star Citizen right now, and its growing pains with PES and 318, and a lot of that frustration has been misdirected towards Squadron 42 and the priorities of development. And I Nazeris and I thought it was important in order to highlight and put things into proper context, so people have more appropriate expectations of what's going on and how the development is going, and why it's these aren't bad things. It's going to be good. It takes more time. And this is with the medical and the healing. This is a conversation I've had multiple times in my Discord and Paul's Discord. And so I just wanted to put these things, in good frame of reference, so that way you guys understand, what we have right now, what sort of intent CIG has laid out with previous statements and other documentation. If you want to know more about all of the lore and the design documents, I'll put the link in the show notes of the previous podcast episode that we did on medical gameplay, and that just went over all the different design documents and the lore for each ship. This was prior to the C8R, and so you can see all those links in there. There's a lot of information. There's an awful lot. There's a whole bunch of links. So, but yeah, I wanted to frame all that in appropriate context so people could see where I'm coming from with my hate for healing beams, but why I do in general, by and large, love the medical gameplay and the system that CIG are building. So yeah, we are at the end of the podcast, and I just want to say thank you everyone for hanging out and being a part of the show. Again, if you ever have any questions, leave them in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or join my Discord, be a part of the conversation. The link is on my YouTube on the About page. The link for my Discord is also in the About section here on Twitch. We'd love to have you be a part of the conversation. I hope to hear more from you soon. Please consider giving, if you're watching this on YouTube, giving a like and a subscribe. Help the channel to grow. We are like right at 900 subscribers on YouTube. We need 1,000 to get monetized. And as soon as we get monetized, then that means more money for StackUp.org just from you watching the video. So that's where we're going. Keep an eye out for more updates on the next episode of the Armchair Admirals and Generals podcast, which probably not this next weekend. I'm hoping to do it on the following weekend, but I got to coordinate with the new guys. I'm also going to be finishing up my
part of the crew, part of the
see, this time it worked.
crew, part of the ship, part of the crew, part of the ship, part of the crew, part of the.
Yeah, see, I had it in the right window. But I'm finishing up my boarding actions video. It's probably going to take me another week and some change, but I'm going to hold it and release it the beginning of the week of Invictus launch week. So like that, I think that Monday. So that way it will catch the algorithm with all the hype leading up into Invictus launch week, and hopefully do really well, push us over the edge with 1,000 followers, get me to monetization on YouTube for StackUp. Yeah. I can't wait for the sequel to this segment. We could call it Dr. Strange Tree, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Beam. I love beams for everything else, just not for healing, because it negatively impacts the gameplay. You know, compared to every other game with a combat medic in it, it negatively impacts the gameplay, and it doesn't add anything. It's a fix for a problem that could be addressed by just having a quick animation that fits with what we're already doing in the game. That's it. But yeah, I will talk to you guys later. I gotta hit the hay. Take it easy. 07. Good night.